Hello, hello. Welcome to Inside the Birds Pregame, live here at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook on Delaware Ave, where Philly loves a winner. Happy Thanksgiving week to everybody. I'm Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds, alongside my co-host Adam Caplan. Joining us is the usual suspects. We have former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant.
Yes, sir.
Fresh off the plane.
Fresh off the plane. Go
Back
Blue.
from Michigan. All right. And, of course, we've got with us our tape breakdown master, Greg Cosell. You missed all the fun last week, Greg?
Did I miss all the fun?
It was so fun.
Was it now?
Yes. Yes.
I know, I'm sorry I missed, but, you know.
I did call your replacement, Trey Thomas. I called him Jay at least 5 times, so hopefully I can get Greg correct today, okay?
Okay. Well, you know, I've been called a lot of things, so it's
Probably
okay.
a lot worse,
Whatever
too.
you want to call me, yes. I've been called a lot of things.
Awesome.
Well, with social media, you know, you get called a lot of things.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes. I'm aware of that. I'm aware. Well, part of the fun that you missed last week was all that discussion about going undefeated, which is now
Out the
done.
window.
Out to it. Ancient history. For the first time, the Eagles lost. On Monday night, they lost to the Washington Commanders. It was a 32-21 score, so they are now 8-1 on the season. And amazingly, in the NFC East, that's only good for a one-game lead over the Giants, who they have yet to play. As far as the Colts, they made their debut under new coach Jeff Saturday last week. They were successful. They went out to Las Vegas. They won 25-20, and they come home today for Jeff Saturday's debut, home debut as the Colts coach. And, you know, their crazy season, they're only, I believe, a game out of the wild card spot. So everybody's still alive with the new playoff format, and the Colts are hungry and looking to get back into this thing. So this should be a very interesting game today. So there's still plenty of time. Come on down to Rivers Casino. They got the TVs in full gear already. You got people placing bets. They're sitting in their leather recliners. They're taking advantage of all the great food and drink specials here at Jack's Bar and Grill. You could be doing the same. So you can come on down here or just keep watching on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. That's great as well. If you're doing that, hit the like button for us and share the show. We really appreciate it. And of course, you want to leave a comment for us in the chat box on YouTube. We'll do our best to answer that. So this is a really interesting game. And as what we always like to do is kind of take a step back and view the bigger picture. And Jason, I wanted to start with you. Obviously, the Eagles lost their first game. They were raked over the coals this week by the media for not being able to stop the run. A lot of moves were made. So in general, when a team has a humbling loss like that, for the Eagles, what are you expecting today as far as a response?
Well, you hope that they can respond, but they've went out during this weekend, got a bunch of people that can stop the run. So that's a good thing, but trying to get them implemented into the game plan in 1 week is pretty tough for anyone. Hopefully they can stop the run. Jonathan Taylor is going to get a high dose of, carries, because that was the game plan this past week, get him the ball as much as possible and have a controlled passing game. So I think that it'll be tough. I think Jonathan Gannon has to come up with a different format in order to slow people down. I think most teams have gotten a beat on what the Eagles are doing defensively, and you saw it a bunch. And we're going to get into this later with what the Commanders did.
Sure.
But I think that he has to be more aggressive toward the line of scrimmage and not give up so many easy plays.
How do you think the locker room in general, which has been good locker room, very close, will interpret two moves that, like you mentioned, significant for run defense, but also two personalities, two veterans like that? And then while most people like the move, some felt like this was sort of a panic button where you go out and just got to get guys now. How do you feel like the locker room will deal with this?
This was a smack in the face to Fletcher Cox and also Hargrave.
Yeah.
It was a smack in the face toward those guys and to Marl, I can't always say his last name.
Tuipulotu.
It was a smack in the face to those guys to go out and get guys that have been on the couch. Right? You guys are not good enough in the run game, and that's basically what's said. And I don't necessarily know if that came from Jonathan Gannon or more just the front office and how we're making that decision. I think that was a very panicky decision rather than trying to figure it out, with the guys that you have. Your team's still undefeated, and and these guys would have been available in a few weeks.
Interesting. All right, we're going to really talk about that when we get into the run defense. I'll ask you more on that. Greg, I'll get your opinion on that as well, but I wanted to know, and I think people want to know, you I'm sure watched the Colts tape last week.
I did.
Jeff Saturday's debut. Is there anything that jumped out that said, oh, okay, this is the Jeff Saturday fingerprint or DNA on this team?
Well, again, that's hard to know, but I will say this, and we'll get into this more, but they can only play one way because of the limitations of their quarterback at this point in his career.
Right.
So I thought last week, what had been essentially a weakness for them all year, their offensive line, I thought they played extremely well last week. And you can say it's the Raiders, but the Raiders do have some talent along the defensive front.
Right.
And I thought that players who we've not heard much about played well. The rookie left tackle, Raymond, had a very good game last week, and he's going up against Jones and Crosby. I thought that the right guard, Will Fries from Penn State, who I believe was a tackle at Penn State,
yes,
he played right guard. I thought he had a very good game.
Okay.
So they had players who you would not have expected to perform well, played very well last week, and they, as I said, and we'll get into this further, they can only play one way, so those guys have to play well in order for the offense to function.
And you would imagine if there was one area where Jeff Saturday would hope to have his biggest impact in week one, the offensive line where he played would be that
Without
spot.
question. And as Jay can attest, yes, there's always technique involved with offensive line. We know that. I've been fortunate enough to be in many training camps in my career and watch offensive line coaches talk about 3 inches as if you're talking about 3 feet. So there's always technique involved.
Sure.
But there's also a level of just intensity, commitment, let's get after it involved. And I think you saw that last week.
Okay, good. We'll get into that as well. Adam, let us discuss the importance of today's game. The Eagles are coming off their first loss. It's really 2 straight games, though, that their run defense was just completely carved up. You have a running team today. Next week, you got the Packers, who can run the ball, and then the week after, obviously, the Titans and King Henry.
Yeah.
How big is it that today they work out some of their problems?
Yeah, no, it's
and
big.
win this game.
Yeah, get the confidence back, because we talked about this with Cox and Hargrave after week 1 at Detroit, and we said the tape's going to tell them how they respond. Because the tape doesn't lie. It just tells you exactly what you're not doing right. Greg talked about technique. We talked to someone who coached in the league for a while this week and said he watched 5 minutes of tape. He could already see on rundowns that they were trying to get to the passer by the footwork, by they were taking 2 bigger steps. It should have taken shorter steps, which I've not heard before. So clearly, and I know you guys were talking about it in Q&A, it can't just be about you trying to get to the quarterback. If your job is on a run play or with run technique, you got to use the right technique. So we're going to learn earlier on this day today, because you know where the ball's going to Jonathan Taylor. And he showed he's over his ankle injury. By the way, he's not on the injury report. He had hurt that ankle first in week 2 and he's been dealing with it. Now he's healthier. So you're right, it's coming. And then, by the way, you mentioned all those games. Then they face Saquon Barkley, as you know, has carved them up over the years.
Yes, I don't know who on their 2022 bingo card had Eagles-Giants battling it out for first place in the NFC East by Thanksgiving
They're a
week.
game back.
Exactly. And who do the Giants have today? It's escaping
Giants
my mind.
Lions.
Giants-Lions,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Okay. Giants win that game, Eagles lose today, and then all of a sudden you're looking at the standings like, whoa, with 2 games against each other left. That
You
would
know,
be
just
interesting.
a quick point. There's a lot to discuss here, and we'll get into it.
Yeah.
But I thought that game last week against the Commanders was one of the most fascinating dynamics I've ever seen, because the Eagles, when all was said and done, allowed 3 yards per rush.
Yes.
Yep, exactly.
And if you said that going into a game, our defense is going to allow 3 yards per rush, you'd say, we'll take that every time. But the game didn't look like that. You know what?
correct.
It was so it's a very odd dynamic.
Right.
It's because they were aggressive too on 4th down earlier in the game.
Right, and there were 21 third downs by the Commanders, 9 of which were 2 yards or 1 yard to go.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not a situation you want to be in.
No.
But it was just such a weird dynamic, because when I watched the tape, and then usually I don't look at stats until after I'm done watching the tape, because sometimes you'll look at stats and they prejudice your thought
Yes.
process.
Yes.
So I try not to look at the stats. I don't know how you do it, but I try not to look at stats.
Right.
Because then you're thinking about the stats as you're watching the
Box score
tape.
scouting, as we call
Right,
it.
right.
Yep.
But then when I looked at the stats and I saw they only allowed 3 yards per rush, I said to myself, wow, if you do that every week, you'd be considered to have a great run defense.
Theoretically, yes.
Right. But I don't think you'd say after watching the tape that the Eagles' run defense was great last week.
Right.
But yet they gave up 3 yards per rush.
Yeah, very odd. Very odd.
They were in a lot of second and shorts.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
So it just made it look worse.
Yes.
They were
Yes.
able to run the ball.
Yeah.
On third down a few times.
And by the way, the first 14 third downs, the Commanders converted 12.
12.
That's
exactly.
another factor.
Yeah.
And they weren't all 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2, by the way.
No, they beat them by the pass. Let's not forget about that.
Right.
Yeah.
First downs they got, how much room they gave up to the receivers.
Yeah.
They ran 21 times on first down. The Eagles did not have one negative run. They didn't stop them for one.
But do you
with that
have
line.
the numbers, what they got on
3.4 yards per carry on first down. 3.4 yards per carry on first down. Not terrible.
Would
but
be considered more good than bad. Not phenomenal, but more good than bad.
No run of more than 11 yards either in the entire game.
Right.
Ryan Robinson got that, and that was also on first down.
Right.
Here's the other problem, though. 51 plays the defense was on the field for the first half.
And
that can't happen.
And the Eagles only ran, I believe, 21 plays in the first half and had the ball for just over 6 minutes.
Yeah. That's not going to work.
24 to 40, 36.
Yep.
Overall
In
stat.
time of possession. More than 2 to 1.
Which is hard to believe with this team. The key to this team this year is dominating time possession, and the guys aren't gassed in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Cox and Hargrave. Cox, 70 snaps. Hargrave, 66? That's generally a full game. And typically on defense, only defensive backs play a full game, maybe linebackers.
Right.
So that's another reason why they had to get involved in free agency this week.
Absolutely. And we will talk about all the moves that the Eagles made. Some of them to shore up run defense, also some because of the injury situation that is facing the Eagles, which we'll talk about right now. This is one of the more, I guess, pessimistic injury reports for the Eagles of the year. They're going to be without several starters today, including tight end Dallas Goedert, who went on injured reserve with a shoulder injury. They're still without Devontae Maddox, the starting slot corner, who's on IR, and of course Jordan Davis is missing the third of 4 games on IR as well. So that's 3 major players who are all out. Also, we talked about Marlon Tuipulotu. He is now also on injured reserve. So you have a lot of guys up front.
And you wonder if the Jordan Davis injury is a little worse because of the signings. Because if they were anticipating him coming back in a week, then maybe you don't make those signings. So
Well,
you wonder.
I think there's 2 schools of thought on that. One, I agree with you, and
I don't know that to be true.
No, some of
right.
the reporting was that he was making his progress, but they weren't absolutely certain that they're going to be able to get him back for that first game, which would be Tennessee.
Plus, Greg has told us how limited Davis was. Yeah, he might play 20 snaps, but you were talking about how he'd have to come off the field.
Yeah, he can't. I mean, he can't play a lot of snaps consecutively.
Right. Which leads me to point 2, Greg, which is not injury related, but something you've talked about. This is a guy they've had since OTAs. They've known for quite a while he's only going to play X amount of snaps. They've known for quite a while that they're going to play the same style of defense that they started to do last year, and yet they went into the season without any natural backup to Jordan Davis. They now have Mojo Joseph, but they decided that was one spot they didn't have.
And I don't know how Jay felt, but the week prior, I actually thought Marvin Wilson played better than Tuipulotu, and he was not active for this past game. So they obviously didn't feel that way, or he would have been active.
Sure.
Now, that was just my interpretation watching the tape. I was surprised Wilson was not an active player because I actually thought snap after snap he played reasonably well, and obviously they didn't think so, or he would have been active.
You would think, yeah, he was not even elevated, right?
No,
So, yeah. So, all right. So as far as making up for the injuries today on offense, you'll have to look for Jack Stoll to now become the number 1 tight end. We'll talk about him a little bit, but he is someone who can block and can catch, so they are okay from that standpoint.
Interesting. So, because they did not elevate Noah Tungiai off of the practice squad, that means Tyree Jackson absolutely will be up today because you've got Calcaterra, who's limited because he's not the big side. He can run. They can't really block, and you've got Jack Stoll. So obviously they think Tyree Jackson will be ready. So he should not be one of the inactives today.
They've really increased their percentage of 11 personnel too as the season's gone on. So they've become now an 11 personnel offense. I think they're 5th or 6th percentage-wise in number of snaps of 11 personnel.
Gotcha.
Whereas earlier in the season they were playing a lot more out of 12
yeah.
personnel with 2 tight ends.
Sure. Well, obviously Jack Stoll's a guy to keep our eye on today. We already mentioned the 2 signings, the one of Linval Joseph, the one of Ndamukong Suh. We'll see. There's sort of various reports out there about who's going to play and how much. But Jay, real quick, because this is really about injuries. But I mean, it's got to be very difficult to be a street free agent, come in and play any amount of snaps when you just joined the team 3 days before.
Usually in this situation, people get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's that's just the reality in this situation because there's so much training that has to go in, and it's very, very hard to just be at home for 10 weeks, 11 weeks, and not be active. You know.
Can you tell in practice if a guy just got there? It's not a game, but can you tell if the guy's in game shape from practicing?
Yeah. You know that he's not in game shape.
It's
not. It's
not possible.
No matter what you're doing at home, it won't replicate battling with another 340-pound human. Right? There is no simulation that you can do with that. Right? And for 30, 40 snaps. So it's pretty tough. Now, the one thing I'll say about Linval Joseph, he understands this defense. He's been in this defense most of his career.
Right.
So I think that may be a plug and play. Ndamukong Suh, that's a totally different subject. Very powerful guy. So if anybody can overcome it, it may be these two guys because of the familiarity and just the experience. But again, usually guys get hurt in these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the Colts have some guys who are hurt as well that are very significant to what they do. First and foremost, linebacker Shaq Leonard. I was just getting used to calling him Shaq. I was calling him Darius, even though I forgot he changed his name back to Shaq. But he's out. He had neck surgery, so he's going to be out, I believe, for the rest of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So that's a big guy for them not to have. Also, second-year defensive end Kwity Paye from Michigan. That's right. He is also out with a, what was it, ankle, I believe?
Ankle. It's the same right ankle he injured originally against Denver on that awful Thursday night game.
Right.
He re-injured it again last week, so he's out this week. And Dayo Odengbo, Mr. Cosell, what do you know about him?
Is he the Vanderbilt kid?
He's going to start today.
Yeah, he's a really powerful kid. I watched him coming out, and he's explosive is a word we often use when a guy is sudden, but he's explosive in terms of being powerful.
Gotcha.
So he's not sudden in his movement, but he's a powerful human being.
Okay.
Because I remember watching him at Vanderbilt, and then I believe he tore his Achilles. He had an injury coming out of college, and he still got drafted in the second or third round because he was a really good prospect. He's a big dude. He's strong. He's powerful. He's not the edge. He's not an edge rusher in a strict sense. As a rusher, he'd be more of a speed to power guy, using his strength. But he's a powerful human being.
All right. Well, we will look for Dayo. Say it again. Dayo Odengbo. Okay. All right. Obviously, they do have their other pass rushers who were banged up throughout the week, but DeForest Buckner is going to go. It looks like he's been dealing with a neck injury, and Yannick Ngakoue, who was dealing with a back injury, also expected to play, so that's a good thing for them. Deion Jackson, backup running back, is going to play.
He is, yeah. He missed the game due to a knee injury, and he is the clear number 2 back, by the way.
Definitely.
After the trade of Naheem Hines and Zach Moss, who came over in the trade for Hines. He's the third back, so it's all about Jonathan Taylor because, again, he's over his ankle injury.
Looks like center Ryan Kelly will play. He's a good center for them. Right tackle Braden Smith was questionable. We'll see if he's able to go.
He actually didn't work Friday. His back acted up, so that's why they added him to the injury report. So they'll see. Now, if he can't play, it almost certainly would be Matt Pryor filling in.
Oh, familiar face.
Yep. They do have, well, it's funny. They do have 2 former Eagles, Dennis Kelly and Matt Pryor.
That's right.
Pryor's being paid $5 million this season. $5 million. Matt Pryor.
Interesting. All right, then.
Good to be Matt Pryor.
Yes, those are, I was going to say, good to be Matt Pryor. Look, the one thing we know about the Colts is that they are like-minded with the Eagles as far as where they invest, where they build. They've struggled at times on the offensive line, as Greg mentioned, but they do have good pass rushers. They have good defensive linemen. They've been trying to put good offensive linemen on the field. So this will be a game of a trench type of game when you watch this game. It should be. This is 2 teams. That's the way they build up. Real quick, Greg, there was a signing that the Eagles made to their practice squad this week that I wanted to get your feeling on. Marquise Blair, the former safety.
Utah or Utah State. I remember watching him coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked him coming out, and he went to Seattle initially and played a lot for a while as a safety. He's kind of long. He's athletic. I thought he could be a good pro. So again, I never know what happens when a guy doesn't work out with another team because you have to be there to know that. I don't know that, and I don't know.
It's all injury related. All injury related, yeah.
So
severe knee injuries. He's had 2 of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you something. I thought he was a really interesting prospect coming out because he's athletic and he's long.
Right.
And I thought he could be a good safety in this league.
All right. Well, an interesting name to keep an eye on because of injuries that have happened for the Eagles and also talent at that position. Eagles always trying to discover somebody out there.
I mean, quite frankly,
He was maybe like a third round.
He
was not a late round.
they
pick.
thought, talking to the Seahawks when they had him, they thought he was going to be their next safety for the next 8 to 10
Yeah,
years.
no, he was a really good pro. I'm telling you, his tape was really good.
He
in
just
college.
physically, he broke down so much they gave up on him, and the Panthers had him, they gave up on him. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at this kid, when you really look at their third safety position,
Well, Kevon Wallace has been disappointing for the
and
Eagles, so there's
why
an
not give it a
opportunity
shot?
here
Right,
if Marquise
right.
Blair is healthy and shows something.
See, here's the question. I don't know whether Jonathan Gannon wants to play more dime, and he doesn't because they don't feel comfortable putting Wallace out there. I don't know that.
That's a good
but
question.
They don't play a lot of dime,
Right.
and I'm wondering if he wants
Rarely.
to. Yeah.
Rarely.
Yeah.
Very rarely. All right. Let's get into this game. A lot to preview. We're going to start off with run defense, surprisingly. Unless you've been living in a cave for the last 2 weeks, if you've watched an Eagles game, you know that that's an area where they have been struggling. Now, we can sort of make arguments for why it might not be as bad as it looks, or they were 8-0 even but they've had some issues in run defense going back to the start of last year. I would say when Adam and I speak to sources, right, personnel people who watch tape, the two common themes we get are a little bit different. One is scheme, and the other is desire, hustle, effort, whatever you want to put that into that box. So, Adam, let's talk about why we've learned this week, why people who watch the tape think the Eagles are really struggling. You had started to allude to it earlier when you talked about footwork.
Yeah, it's a technique issue because there's a certain technique they use for this particular front.
Right.
And because the two guys who are doing it are more known for pass rushers, not stopping the run.
Right.
We talked about this before, actually. Remember, it's the combination of playing the run the right way and then playing the run on your way to get the quarterback, which is the wide nine theory.
The old way, yes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's too much of the old way. Because one game you might see them doing great against the run. The next game you go, what happened here? It's not like they're getting crushed against the run.
Right.
Like they're giving up 180, 200 a game. But it's Damian Pierce did well against them. When you start playing the better teams, it's going to get you. Mm-hmm. And the Colts may not be the greatest team in the world, but when you face the dynamic running backs, you got to play your technique better. Now, I know that some people are criticizing the defensive line coach, and that's fine. But the D coordinator, it's his scheme.
Sure.
He's got to get involved. Remember, Gannon is a defensive backs coach by trade, not D-line. He's never coached it.
Mm-hmm.
I checked into that. Mm-hmm. So he's got to keep showing that tape, and these guys have got to get the technique right. They're way too inconsistent with the technique.
Is there something that jumps out, Greg and Jay, when you guys are watching the tape where you say they're not playing the right technique, or they're just getting so far upfield in a play where they're supposed to kind of hold their ground?
To me, it's known since the Cowboys last year that two double teams will move our two D tackles.
Right.
I would agree with that 100%.
Right. So two double teams will move our D tackles. So you would think, because they are veterans.
You meant the first Cowboys game, like week 3 of last year.
Last year,
Yes.
and this has been consistent.
Absolutely.
Right. So you would think, because of that history of putting that on tape, you would expect the double team. Our guys are going headlong into double teams, overstriding, not being prepared for it, and getting turned around.
That's the footwork
That's a
we're talking
different.
about.
That's a different thing, and it doesn't make sense at times to me. And I don't know if you see the same thing, but at times that doesn't make sense because I would be anticipating that, knowing that it's a weakness that we've shown on tape. And that's just my thought process. Now, that's one side of the D tackle. We've had games where the secondary players were just disinterested in coming up and tackle.
Correct.
But this last game, I actually thought that the secondary players came up and tackled pretty well.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of times the D tackles were where the linebackers were.
Sure. To your point, that's why a lot of runs, no run more than 11 yards. So they weren't getting into the secondary and breaking a lot of tackles. There was a lot of up
But
front.
this is the tape breakdown, guru. But
Well,
that's
I'll
just
tell
some
you.
things that I've seen.
There's a lot to get into here, so we'll kind of take in bits and pieces.
Okay.
To play off what Jay said, that's very fair based on tape. Because everything, the way I do my work is everything I say is based on tape.
Of course.
And I would say that there's too many snaps in which Fletcher Cox and Hargrave are moved too easily by double teams. They're literally moved out of the point of attack to the second level of the defense, and that makes it really difficult for linebackers to play as well, because then you get your defensive tackle in your lap.
Right.
And you're stuck.
They're not kept clean, as we
They're
like
not
to say.
kept
in the
clean.
Beast. Yeah.
That shows up on tape far too often. Okay?
Sure.
But let's get into what the sort of structural foundation is. When they play in their base front, okay, their base front now, it's a 5-man front. So essentially, they're playing for the most part, with a nose shade, we call it, meaning he's head up on the center. That would be a 0 technique.
Yep.
Or if he's shaded a little, we call it a 1 technique.
1 technique, right.
Then the 2 D tackles are either playing kind of what we call a 3 technique. People have heard that term, or maybe a 2-eye, which means they're a little closer. But they're basically playing with a 5-man front.
Right.
So what I did last week, and this is not based on a stats service, I watched every 5-man front that was a run front. Okay, the 5-man run front. Okay, and here were the numbers, where this is where predominantly Tui Pelotu was the no shade.
Right.
The position that Jordan Davis would normally play. Okay? So there were 33 rushes against that front for 108 yards, which was 3.3 yards per rush. Now, if you just look at that as a number, that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But it didn't look like that watching the tape.
Right.
It was like I said, it was an odd dynamic. But
Right.
that's the structure of their front. That front is designed really to stop the run because it's a 5-man front. It's
Sure.
not a 4-2 or a 4-3. It's a 5-man front.
Right.
So you're counting on that to stop the run.
Right. So in your tape study, because a 5-man front is often said, what it does is it prevents the offensive line from double teaming. But if you take a
not
tackle or a
necessarily.
tight end and pull them
Right.
up to the gap,
Right.
which I think you probably
Right.
saw a lot of, then you can still get double teams up the middle.
Not necessarily,
No?
because
Okay.
then you can get your tight end involved in the run game, which teams do. You
Right.
know, so you can still have double teams against a 5-man front. You know,
And they wouldn't.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
when you start either taking a tight end or
Right,
you even pull a
right.
tackle, trap up the middle. Now on the inside, you can get a
without
double
question.
team.
Without question.
How much of that did you see? What Washington did?
I can specifically remember plays where Fletcher Cox was doubled and just moved right out of there.
Right.
And and because it's Fletcher Cox, people might be surprised by that.
Go back to week 1 against Detroit. This is what Jeff and I were told. In fact, you probably talked about it too. They continually got moved off the football.
Yes.
And I remember we said, when's the
And
last time
last
you saw
year, as
Fletcher
Jason
Cox do
pointed.
it?
Yeah.
That's what Jason was
By the
talking
way,
about. It happened last year.
Run defense, if you talk to any coach, it's not a mystery as to when you're playing well or not playing well.
Right.
People want some sexy answer. It's not a big mystery.
Right.
Okay? You have to control and displace blocks. You have to play in your gaps properly, and you have to tackle. It's
Right.
not a mystery. There's no one is looking up to the sky for some answer to come down out of the sky.
And by the way, Linval Joseph loves that. That's why he's here.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about him not being in the right gap.
No. He knows
he
the
is
defense.
a mountain of a man, and this is why he's here.
Jason, is there an issue here that has, and we've talked about it at times, but scheme to personnel? I mean, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave are naturally at their best 3 techniques. I think most people would argue that. They get upfield, they get sacks, and it's been pointed out to both Adam and I separately by others who watch tape, who note that they know that those 2 guys are going to be free agents at
Exactly.
the end of the year.
They-
Do you think that factors in?
I
They're
definitely-
looking for sacks.
I definitely think it factors in, especially with the nature of this team. We've been up most of the season, where not many games where we're playing from behind.
Right.
So you kind of get into the mentality of pass rushing because you guys have been playing with the lead and the offense has been passing most of the time. So I think all of those things can play into it. And when you're getting into veteran guys, sometimes over the years, I remember in my last couple of years, I thought I knew way more than the coaches. And I didn't, but you get so used to doing things your way. And that's usually a sign that you're on your way out of the league.
Right.
Well, the Eagles have
You're not
been.
going to win against the coaches.
You're not going to win.
Yeah.
You're not going to win against the coaches, but at the same time, you've had success doing things your way. And for someone to come and ask you to do something that is opposite of your skill set and or you don't believe in that structure, it's going to be very hard for a person that's been doing this for 10 plus years.
And remember, last year, Cox went public with his issues with the scheme.
It's tough. It's not an easy thing to do with a guy that is headstrong. You can't be as good as Fletcher Cox and not be headstrong.
Right.
It's impossible.
It's funny that you mentioned, though, that the coach, you don't beat the coaches, but I would say for this veteran group of defensive linemen who have some personalities, including Fletcher Cox, who are not afraid to speak up and say things, the Eagles have ran through about 5 or 6 defensive line coaches in the last 7 or 8 years. So going from Philip Daniel to Chris Wilson to, I forget who, Washburn, and now Now, this is year 2 for Tracy Rocker. Do you think it's tough for a guy like Rocker? And this is speculation, but based on experience, right? He's coached 25 of his 27 years in college. Right? He had one or 2 years in the NFL a couple of years ago. Now he comes to a team with guys who are established, guys who made Pro Bowls. Is it difficult for him to get through to them when they've been doing it a certain way and it's worked for them for almost a decade now?
100%. It's always better when you have a history. Like if you're a coach, the best D-line coaches I know were assholes. And sorry for the language. Yeah,
it's okay.
That's
fine.
That's the best D-line coaches that I know, and they're usually. They had younger guys, they had success early with some of those guys, and now when veterans came in, they could see, okay, this guy had this player, I can, kind of acquiesce to his coaching. But again, like I said, like you said, these guys are tough. It's a college guy that's coming in there, and I'm pretty sure there's some pushback. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do you feel like you watch other teams that play this style of front? Do you look at the Eagles?
Play 5-man fronts now. It's big in the
sure,
league.
It's huge.
It's
right?
really big in the league.
Do the Eagles still look like a team to you, though, that is transitioning from having 4-3 upfield personnel to a team that's trying to play a more Vic Fangio-style front?
Well, that's what they're trying to do, obviously. And I think Jay's point's a really good one. I mean, Fletcher Cox, for his whole career, has essentially been a 3-technique upfield player.
Right.
And, a really, really good one. Arguably a notch below a Hall of Fame type player for a long time in this league. I mean, he was a guy who got a lot of sacks as a D tackle. He was a one-gap upfield player. That's what he is. And to come in and ask him now to do something that, and Jay's right, he's at the point in his career where, even if he was a guy that loved coaching and all that, it's still like, hey, this is not what I do best.
Right.
And even Hargrave to a certain extent. I mean, Hargrave, everybody thinks of him in Pittsburgh, but with that quote-unquote 3-4-5-2, but he was really a gap player there as well.
Right.
Because they play it differently.
Right.
So you're asking guys to do something that, is a little different. And they're veterans, and they're used to playing a certain way. It's hard. Even Josh Sweat. I mean, I think Josh Sweat, personally, if he was in a true, let's say he was in a Jim Washburn type defense.
Sure.
I think Josh Sweat could get 15 sacks a year, personally.
Right.
That's my opinion. I
Yeah,
don't Greg think.
No, I agree with you. Remember, these guys are set too, and that's the thing. That's a different. When you're young, you're hungry. When you're older, you got 30, 40 million bucks, and the guy's telling you to do something different. What's your motivation to listen to him?
Right.
Well, here's the phenomenal part.
And that's sometimes that's the truth.
Didn't you tell us last week on our show about that later in your career?
Yeah,
You're sick of hearing. You're like, I've heard this before.
Yeah, late in your career is tough, especially when your position group, the ones that are lauded and the one that gets the Hall of Fame recognition is Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald is a joker and can do as much as he wants. J.J. Watt, these guys can do as much as they want in different positions and rush gaps and all those things, and you're telling me that I have to be a team player and two-gap people. It's tough.
Right.
Yeah. So here's the fascinating part, and we have to let the rest of the year play out because, again, they are 8-1, right? They've won games despite maybe not having the quote-unquote best personnel for the defense they're trying to run. But in the offseason, this is actually Josh Sweat. You guys just brought him up. This is year 2 of his 3-year extension. Javon Hargrave is up after this year. Fletcher Cox is up after this year. This could be a very different looking team going forward. It will be a different looking team. But they've always prioritized upfield. It'll be interesting to see if Gannon's still the head coach, the defensive coordinator, if he doesn't get a job, if he's back here, if the staff is generally the same. It'll be interesting to see if there's a more of a philosophical shift on how they make this defense going into next year.
Because right now, with the two guys coming in on one-year deals, the two veterans.
Right.
And you got these two guys that are here, Cox and Hargrave, their contracts are up. The last man standing is really Milton Williams, who, quite frankly, if everybody's healthy, is out of the rotation.
Right.
So this thing could look completely different. And I know you're going here. Well, if Gannon's back, they obviously would add players that fit the scheme better. Let's call it like it is.
You would think.
These guys don't fit the scheme, the two starters.
Well, I mean, that goes back to why is Fletcher Cox back on a $14 million deal? I mean, he's a great player. Again, he's done great things, but that's a lot of money for a guy who doesn't, quote-unquote, always do what you need to do.
All of us have talked to people, you guys have seen it on tape, times when they get moved off the football.
Right.
That's not what you're looking for when you're there to stop the run.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just we talked about this a couple weeks
That's
ago
why
on the
guys
show.
get cut. I mean, look what happens. You talk about Brandon Staley, who runs similar stuff to Rich Gannon, to Jonathan Gannon, and they just cut Jerry Tillery, who was what, a first-round pick, I
Yes,
believe.
and he wanted to do his own thing.
Was he first?
First round.
So I mean, here you're cutting a first-round pick who actually has a lot of talent. I watched him coming out of Notre Dame. You could say he's a very talented guy if you're looking for physical traits. But obviously, he wasn't doing what he was told, or not doing it well enough, and he gets cut.
Right.
I mean, that you played. That happens.
That happens when you're expendable,
Right.
And your contract is not guaranteed,
Right,
You know, or they owe you money, right? But it's
All right. Well, let's talk about the personnel that is incoming. They obviously made two very big moves this week. They signed Ndamukong Suh, 35-year-old. He is a defensive tackle, more of a 3 technique in his career, like a Fletcher Cox and a Hargrave. And then there's Linval Joseph. He's 34, as we've already mentioned, more of what Jordan Davis does, a head-up, nose tackle. They've got 7 Pro Bowls between them. They both have won Super Bowl championships, so you're also bringing in winners, guys who are reputed around the league for being good at what they do.
We want winners.
You got to have winners.
Yeah.
Got to have
Coach
winners.
Singletary.
Yeah, we want winners.
Instead of losers.
Greg, I'll start with you because both of these guys were on the street all year. So let's try to go back to last year. Linval Joseph was with the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Linval Joseph has been a terrific player in his NFL career for what he is.
For what he is, right.
Yeah, everybody
Which is a
knows
run
what
stopper.
he is.
Absolutely.
He has been an absolutely terrific player.
Was he even terrific last year with the Chargers?
I'm going to be honest. I wasn't. I can't remember.
You weren't examining Linval
No, I wasn't
Joseph?
studying Linval Joseph. I didn't look into the future and say he's going to be with the Eagles in a year.
Really?
So I can't answer that.
Yeah.
But I mean, throughout his career, because I've obviously seen him a lot. But Linval Joseph's been a terrific run stopper. He's essentially a nose shade, which, by the way, a nose shade can play in a 4-man D-line too. Sure. So it's not just, playing in a 5-man front.
Right.
But that's essentially what he is, and he's been great at it, So my guess is you could plug him in. You said he's plug and play. I would agree with that. I think you could plug him in to play 20 snaps a game, and he'd be able to do that right now.
Because when Davis comes back, let's just say it's the Tennessee game, right? Week 13. Those 2 guys as the noses, let them split the time because it's not like they're in base a ton.
Right.
But when they're in base, there's your 2 guys.
Well, the question becomes, does Joseph in their base, do they start to see Jordan Davis? Because there have been times this year, I think 7 or 8 times where he lined up as a 3 technique.
Right.
Which I would think, since they traded up to draft him 13, they might see that they'd like him to perhaps play that down the road. If he can lose a few pounds and be in much better shape.
Sure.
Because he's an athletic freak.
Yes.
And Joseph's certainly not a long-term answer. It's not as if Joseph's going to be here for the next 3 years.
Right. No, but I think it does give them, like you meant, when Jordan Davis comes back, if they want to continue to play the front and they can't use Marlon Tuipulotu there anymore because A, he didn't really exactly play very well in that spot, and B, he got hurt. So now they have a natural backup or 2 interchangeable parts, and they don't have to lose that element of their defense.
Because again, without the 2 guys who got hurt, you're looking at Cox, Hargrave, and Milton Williams, who really has not played as high level as he did maybe earlier.
He's been hurt a lot this year.
Right. So you had to do something. It's not like they were going to just wait for these guys to come back. In previous years when they weren't as good, like in 2020, they may not have done this. They believed they could go to the Super Bowl. Get this done now, bring these veterans in, get them in game shape and see what happens. But they absolutely had to do something, particularly the nose tackle position.
Yeah. How about Suh? He was playing last year for Tampa Bay the last 2 years.
Suh is a fascinating guy because Suh at his best is kind of a freakish guy because he's super powerful, but he's an athlete too. Suh is not just a big, powerful guy. I mean, I remember in Tampa Bay, they would line him up off the ball and use him as part of stunts. He'd rush the quarterback. He'd line up basically in a linebacker position. I mean, Suh's a different cat now.
Right.
I don't know what his status is being on the couch for the last, however long, but Suh was a little freakish. I mean, Suh's been a really, really good player in his career.
Yeah.
He's a different guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's
as
been
strong as a defensive lineman as the NFL has seen.
Right.
But
That's athletic too.
Yeah, he's athletic. The dude is, I don't know if in my time, I
Right.
don't know if I've seen a guy that like as strong as he is. And that's what you get, like all time strong.
Yeah, and I've seen him in person.
Yeah.
And he is just, which I know you have too, obviously.
And this is coming from offensive linemen that has to go against him.
Yeah. I mean, he's just one of those guys. The description people use is he's just country strong.
Country strong.
He's just one of those guys.
And he brings an attitude.
Right.
Well, he's a little crazy.
He's an attitude guy, but he's also a good athlete. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not just a guy who's strong.
Right. I want to go back to what you said about how it's sort of a slap in the face to Hargrave and Cox. Do you think he's here not just to shore up the run defense, but to send some messaging?
Yeah, I think I understood the Linval Joseph.
Right.
You understand that because that's Jordan Davis's replacement.
Right.
When you start getting into Suh, when you start getting into 3 techniques, you
Yes.
got 2 guys that do that, and that's
Right.
done it at a high level for a long
Right,
time.
right.
And they
So
had Bill
now-
Williams also, by the way.
Exactly, right? So now this here seems that it's more than the run defense. This is, yes, it's a message.
Yeah.
And that's why I said smack in the face, because you get a guy to play position. It's like, getting in a guy that's an established receiver, and you got Devontae Smith and whoever else, and you bring in Emmanuel Sanders or something.
Right.
It's weird.
Right,
it gets
right,
weird
right,
really
right.
fast.
Well, look,
Well-
you've been around both as a player and on a coaching staff, and you know that this is not about singing Kumbaya. The
Yeah.
players are not playing up to what they're supposed to be playing.
That's right.
And this team firmly believes, as they should, that they can be in the Super Bowl and win it. They're not messing around.
No.
Yeah.
Certainly not. I think the clubhouse dynamic now is something to pay attention to. I agree with you. I thought Linval Joseph made sense. All of a sudden, Ndamukong Suh, and I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, but my first thought was, okay, that's pretty interesting. If you're Fletcher, if you're Javon, this is not a position that needed to be upgraded because even though Tui Peloti went
they
down,
need depth because
but they needed depth,
they need
not
snaps.
necessarily got
they need
that
snaps
stature.
because remember Cox played 70 snaps last week. He had it because they had nobody else.
Well, and that's because they had to play
Way too
70
many.
snaps.
Right.
That's the biggest thing.
He also-
Whoever has to do
By the
that.
way, he's also part of it because
get off
they
the
didn't
field.
get off the field.
Right,
Thank you very
right,
much.
Right.
That's the biggest point.
Played
They couldn't
70
get off the field.
snaps. You could argue because he didn't play
Because he
those
didn't
snaps
play
well
well,
enough.
right?
Hello? Yes.
Well, I chuckled at that.
and the defensive game plan. I can't let Jonathan get off.
Oh no, we're gonna get into
Defensive
it.
game plan.
No. There was a lot. I don't think people remember that there were a lot of third downs that were converted through the air that we're going to get into.
a lot.
A
in
lot
that
of
game.
them.
Yeah.
And a lot of bad coverage.
Yeah. But I want to reshift
Scheme. A lot of bad coverage scheme.
We will get into
Scheme
it.
in which the Commanders were definitely prepared for.
Sure. So fast forward to today's game. Obviously, everyone believes, and I think they would have thought it anyway because of how the Colts play football, that this is going to be a big feed Jonathan Taylor day because of what you've seen from the Eagles defense the last 2 weeks, and what the Colts organically do anyway. When
They
Jonathan
have to
Taylor
do. They
is
can't
healthy,
play
they
the other
run.
way.
Right. So you saw Taylor last week, healthy, have a pretty good week against the Raiders. What jumped out at you from his tape?
Well, I think Taylor at his best. I mean, I remember when he came out, I thought he was the best running back in the draft class as far as a runner.
Local kid, by the way.
Right. And so Taylor, to me, is a really just good combination of being physical inside. He gets hard yards, and he's also explosive. So he can get to the second level, and he can re-accelerate, and he can take it to the house. He had a long touchdown run last week, and he just erased the angle
Angles.
of the safety
Yeah.
in a heartbeat. And that was a veteran safety, I believe. That was Duron Harmon, maybe?
Yeah.
He just erased.
That was Harmon.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Harmon's been playing a long time. And
Right.
he erased the angle like that. You saw it.
Yeah, left side.
So he's a complete runner, a really complete runner. And he's your classic volume runner. You can always tell watching Taylor, this was very true last year when he was not really hurt and he could play pretty much every game, that he is a guy that just feasts on getting the ball over and over and over and getting into that rhythm as a runner and feeling the flow of the game.
Sure.
You know, he's one of those guys.
Yeah, not a lot of third down backs come out of Wisconsin. They're usually built
No,
like
but
that.
he's actually not a bad receiver, by the way.
Well,
No, he
No,
caught
it's
a
true.
lot of passes last year. Remember, he's got track speed.
Yeah.
His long speed is tremendous.
Yeah.
If he gets going like downhill, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
He struggles, and it's a small critique. You get a body in front of him, and he has to like change lanes. You know, like I saw that on tape a few times this past week where he had to make guys miss in the hole, that type of thing. Like I'm talking about defensive linemen, where he has to bounce it and things like that. He may struggle, but if he gets a full head of steam going, yeah, it's not going to be good.
Also 225 pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a 195-pound scat
Yeah.
back.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you think about last week's, we talked about the average was low, but you also look at Washington. They don't have a very good offensive line, especially on the inside. And their two runners, Robinson right now is not a dynamic runner. He's just coming back from the injury, from being shot and everything.
He's not quite that guy anyway.
Exactly.
He's not Jonathan Taylor.
Right. So some of those runs that were 2 or 3 or 4 that were constantly coming at the Eagles last
he
week,
can pop them.
These could be popped for a lot bigger.
Right.
I mean, this is the single biggest threat to them today.
This type of runner is the scariest runner to me, because you can have him contained for most of the game, and you do one thing wrong, and boom, it's a touchdown. You know, and that's the scary type of runner, because you're like, oh, I got this guy, we got this guy, and then the guy's out of position one time and he's scoring.
And remember, the Eagles linebackers are smaller.
Yeah.
And if you get to the second level, if they have to continually get him second level, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Now, tell me about a little bit of what you saw in the O-line, which you said played a little bit better for the
I
Colts.
thought they played well last week.
We were kind of getting accustomed to saying, man, Quentin Nelson has not been the Quentin Nelson that we've seen in the first 2
And that's
years.
probably true overall.
Uh-huh.
But I thought last week the O-line played well.
Sure. And
Most of
Ryan
the big
Kelly has
runs
been a
were
good
his
center
side.
for them for a couple
Ryan
of years.
Kelly's a solid player. I wouldn't
center,
say he's a great player.
No.
But he's a solid player. Like I said, Will Fries, I thought, played really well at right guard. And Raymond, I thought Raymond had a really good game. Now, you know, I remember his first start, I think it was either a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, and he really struggled.
Yeah.
He had a really difficult, mostly in pass protection, which I would have expected him to struggle with based on his college tape and the fact that he's only played tackle for 2 years.
Sure.
But I thought he played well last week.
This is a guy, Adam, who was all over the map at the draft. Bernard Raymond.
We got a
left
lot
tackle.
of grades on him,
Yeah.
and he went in the third. I mean, we had teams that had him lower. He's a 25-year-old rookie, project player, long, and he has some athleticism, as Greg is talking about. But remember, earlier in the season, he's being rotated.
Yeah.
In fact,
With Matt Pryor.
Matt Pryor started, and they rotate Raymond in, and then things were not good with Raymond, so they played Dennis Kelly. He's really not a left tackle. but
Old
he can
friend
play
Dennis
with the
Kelly.
pitch,
But
right?
you can line him up at least.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is, it's amazing how offensive line can play well when you get the ball out quick. It's just amazing to me how
better than
fast the
Peyton
narrative
Manning.
changes.
Yeah.
When you look at the game, like, I counted twice where the man threw the ball over 20 yards. Like, it wasn't.
You're so right.
It wasn't like, you know, that complicated. But the offensive line gets confidence. They run the ball well, and you get the ball out of their hand and protect that long. They play well now.
Sure.
Yeah, because you don't have bad plays that way. You run the ball, which they all want to do because they come off the ball, and then it's all quick game. I mean, that's what their pass game. It has to be that because of Matt Ryan.
Right.
So you're really helping your offensive line as well. They're feeling good about themselves.
You guys are the masters of the segue. We're going to talk about Matt Ryan and that offense in a second. We're going to take a break right now to hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars, including the voice of the Eagles. That's Mr. Merrill Reese.
Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, big thanks to our friends at Sky Motor Cars. You can see them out there in Westchester, PA. If you go in, you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you, you'll get a great deal. If not, visit them at SkyMotorCars.com. All right, well, that was a wrinkle in the Colts offense last year, last week, that not everybody saw coming. Jeff Saturday, first major move as Colts head coach is he reinstated Matt Ryan as the starting quarterback after a couple of weeks of watching Sam Ehlinger play. Ryan may not be what he once was, Greg, but I mean, I'm sure you watched and noticed the difference between him and Sam Ehlinger leading that offense.
Well, Jay can speak to this, and I've been around Sam Ehlinger, by the way. I've met him. He's a great kid.
Yeah.
But the players know that Sam Ehlinger can't really play yet.
Right.
And so now you go into a game with Sam Ehlinger, and you kind of know that, you know, we can't play.
Yeah.
And you can't
We got no chance.
You can't do that to your team.
Right.
You just, I mean, Matt Ryan is not what he was, clearly, but Matt Ryan's a professional quarterback. Matt Ryan understands what he's seeing. He understands what he's looking at. He knows where to throw the football. He's just become limited in what he can do. He never had a big arm,
right,
and now it's less.
Now it's less.
So there's certain things he can't do physically, but at least mentally he can control the game.
Right.
And you have a chance to win and play.
Right.
You know, with Sam Ehlinger, you don't really have that chance.
Sure.
So you have to give your team a chance. So it had that move had to be made.
So I know we talked about run defense and the issues there. And Jay, I know you're chomping at the bit to also mention that pass defense was not very, schematically and from production standpoint, wasn't great for the Eagles last week as well. Before I get into that, Jonathan Gannon was asked this week about his philosophy on run defense versus pass defense, and if he's okay being a little loose in the run to be better against the pass. So I want our viewers and listeners to hear what Jonathan Gannon had to say.
That's a good question, Jeff. I mean, I think, you don't want teams to run on you all day. You don't want to do that. So you got to be good against. You got to defend the run and the pass. With saying that, that there's stresses and strengths of each call, and I always talk about the quickest way to give up a lot of points is the ball to go over your head. Now, with saying that, when offenses adjust, we have to adjust too. So, and that's not just like this year. That's in a game. That's each game is a little bit different. How you set up the game plan. That's during the game. What's going on? That's what we talked about Houston. What kind of was going on. So and you just gotta. It's a constant chess match back and forth. Are they going to keep doing this or are they not? But if you win some of, like I said, if you win some of those known pass situations that we've been winning at a pretty high clip, the however many plays we played, 80 plays, that goes down to 60, you know what I mean? And you're right where you want to be, and you give up the kind of the points that we've been giving up. So you got to see how the game's kind of going and set it up that way. But what I think it's a good question.
All right, that was Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, and I thought a good question by the Inquirer's Jeff McClain, which is basically we spent all this time, belaboring the run defense, but what's more important, run defense or pass defense in today's NFL? And what you heard Gannon guys say is basically, look, pass defense is very important. You heard him bringing up known pass downs that they gave up, but he also said, but I got to be realistic here. You just can't run on my defense all day long either. But I thought it was really interesting that he seemed just as disappointed by what he called being exploited on known pass downs. You look at the Commanders converted third downs of 5, 6, 8, and 10 yards, and they went 9 of 12 on third down conversions in the first half. So Jason, what did you see there?
So our team is a quintessential zone team for the most part, right? In a lot of their coverages, right? In cover 4. And even though it seemed like Darius Slay was matched up against Terry McLaurin because he would rotate side, he was still in zone.
Right.
Right? So now, that game plan was effective versus Justin Jefferson because the Vikings had a tendency to run Justin Jefferson vertical. So now once he goes vertical, you have him man-to-man, and now it's to your advantage having your best on their best.
Right.
But the Commanders understood if we take this guy across the field, now people have to change responsibilities, and Darius Slay can't cover him across the field. So now you begin to see guys crossing and doing things like that. So there's no purpose of putting Darius Slay on his side if he's not sticking him man-to-man. So in those situations, that to me, that scheme. There's a couple cover 4 concepts where, the number 1 front side goes vertical, so now the safety and the corner have to take him man-to-man. And now the backside guy is crossing on a deep cross. Normally the safety would cut it, take him one-on-one, and then the corner would replace him.
Right.
They had Darius Slay following this guy all the way across the field. To me, that's scheme. And then Terry McLaurin has our number. He's a very good route runner. Terry McLaurin's a very good route runner. They had him isolated on Gardner Johnson a few times.
And they put him in the inside slot.
Yeah,
right?
in the slot, right? And they had man. They put him in man once or twice, and he yelled to the camera, "You got to safety stick me. You can't stick me."
Right.
And it's true. And he's a guy that has a little nuance to his route, knows when to do a move or two.
Right.
So to me, if you want to pay a guy like Darius Slay, lock him and let him play man-to-man. But don't switch sides and play zone. And then once he goes to the slot, don't put Darius Slay in the slot. It was just weird concepts like that to me, and there was no adjustments being made.
Well, normally Slay does not go inside.
Yeah.
Right. Because I made a note, there were 3 third downs in which they got hurt when they went zone. It was McLaurin 26 yards on 3rd and 2 in the first quarter. It was McLaurin 14 yards.
That was across the field on cover 4.
Yep.
It was McLaurin 14 yards on 3rd and 8 in the second quarter, and it was Samuel 23 yards on 3rd and 6 in the second quarter, which was dagger.
Yeah.
They were in zone.
Yep.
But then the one you mentioned, he had 18 yards on 3rd and 5 in the second quarter, came out of 11 personnel, 1 by 3. 1 by 3 means a tight end is a single guy.
Right.
1 by 3 set, and McLaurin was number 3 to trips. So he was number 3, and Gardner Johnson was matched on him because the Eagles went cover 1 there. They actually went cover 1 robber, but Gardner Johnson was matched up on him on that. You remember that,
Yep.
right?
I remember the play. Yep, his corner.
He killed him.
They killed him.
Ran a great route. He ran a great route, and he killed Gardner Johnson.
Sure.
The other thing that I'll say about that is that I will say that Darius Slay didn't play his best game because there were times where he was second guessing himself. It was one in particular.
Can you tell that by body language?
Body language. It's just because I don't think that he trusts up front.
Right.
Because we've seen our secondary be aggressive when a blitz is called. We've seen them be aggressive when they have the advantage. It was a cover 2 defense. It was a cover 2. To me, it looked like it was a cover 2 defense. There was a flat runner, which is weird. It was a blurred line.
Kind of stuff.
It was a blurred line. It was a defensive tackle that ran to the flat, but Darius Slay was playing flat foot with a safety over the top, and he should have drove on the slant, but he let Terry McLaurin catch it right in front of him. It was really weird. I was like, why didn't he? He was in position, looking at the quarterback, but he second guessed it, which I don't see him do.
Right.
So there was a little bit of that where he didn't play his best game, but to me, it was more scheme than anything.
So if you're the Indianapolis Colts today, and you're Matt Ryan, and you've got guys like Michael Pittman, you've got Alec Pierce, you've got Paris Campbell, who's come on now finally for the Colts, are you trying to sort of copycat that? Are you trying to get some matchups, or do you expect that the Eagles will not play that same style of defense to even try to be exploited?
To me, I don't think that Paris Campbell can run. Pittman can run a little bit too. I don't think that Ryan can get the ball there.
Right.
So therefore, schematically, I think that Jonathan Gannon could be more aggressive and our corners could be more aggressive. That's what this game tells me.
Okay.
I don't think that the Raiders really understood the limitations of Matt Ryan because they were playing so far off and giving up 5-yard hitches, dink and dunk plays the entire game.
I mean, that 35-yard touchdown to Campbell was just really bad defense.
It was a pirate concept where it was 2 5-yard ends with bad tackling.
Wow.
It was just pitch and catch.
It wasn't a great concept or anything. Like, it was a standard Peyton Manning concept where the 2 guys run in, and 1 guy goes vertical.
No, I mean, I think what you get with the Colts, here's the way I'd sort of map out what they do. Pittman is going to be kind of the short intermediate receiver. He's got a big body. He runs a lot of in-breaking routes. Ball's going to come out quick to him. Okay. He's not going to run vertically very often. They'll take some vertical shots, fades, because Matt Ryan can't drop back 7 steps and throw a true vertical. They'll throw some fades to Alec Pierce just to test it and see, hey, can this work? Because Pierce is 6'3", and Pierce can run, actually.
Right.
He was a very good prospect coming out of the University of Cincinnati. Campbell's going to be the jet sweep guy, the RPO guy, the tunnel screen guy. You want to get Campbell the ball in space and on the move because he's a big body and he can run.
He can run.
So you're going to. Those are the things that they have him do.
Right.
So they kind of delineate what they do with their receivers based on the fact that the quarterback has some limitations now.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we know that the Eagles' pass rush also was not really a big factor in last week because all the running and then
I mean, there weren't a lot of plays.
Adam and I have been talking to some source, and then a specific personnel source looked at Robert Quinn and said, he's played 3 games now for the Eagles, and in particular last game, he felt like he did not see vintage Robert Quinn, didn't see bend, didn't see explosion, and interestingly, Robert Quinn later in the week after the game popped up on the injury report with a back injury.
Thursday.
On Thursday. So that's after the game.
But
But the
funny you
person who
say
watched the tape almost thought he was playing like he was
I thought
hurt.
he looked stiff watching the tape.
Yeah.
And maybe his back was bothering him, because I thought he looked stiff, and he's not a guy that normally looks stiff.
Yeah, because I think, Jeff, you had heard that the back injury had nothing to do with practice this week. It was
Right.
after the game, right?
Right. So maybe this is something, and I don't know, the guys over 30, we just talked about when you bring in guys who are over 30, but clearly, Jay, I mean, you have not seen Robert Quinn deliver what was expected of him so far. And I know it was tough. They had a weird schedule, right? 2 games in 4 days,
Right.
not practices. Then they were off 11 days, so I get it. But
Yeah, and it wasn't many opportunities for the defensive line. Just in general, there was a few pick concepts that got the ball out quick. I thought Heineke got a good job of getting the ball out. You know, so I don't think there were a lot of opportunities for the defensive line in general.
all right. Definitely something to monitor, though, with Robert Quinn.
And Terry McLaurin won quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He won quick.
He is smooth.
And it was both games. It wasn't just this game. Terry McLaurin had a good game versus the Eagles the first game.
Right.
Right.
You know, because like when you have guys that can move out of your spot, they're timeless. When you can make a guy move out of your spot, they're timeless. They're Tim Duncans of football. They're going to always be able to get open.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. We're going to get into hour 2 of the pregame show here, Inside the Birds Pregame Live, but we're going to take a quick break to hear from our friends at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook.
Game night for me is every night. At the place where I meet up with the guys, grab a cold one, and watch the big game on the big screen. So whether it's the money line, the pass line, or a parlay, I'm in it to win. This is my city, and this is my place.
All right, we're back. Big thanks to our friends here at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook. Now, the fun doesn't stop after this pregame show. Adam and I are going to have another watch party out in the Sportsbook. We're going to go through the game for the crowd. We're going to do some giveaways. It's going to be a great time. So still plenty of time to make it down here, catch our watch party, or even the second half of this show. Of course, food from Jack's Bar and Grill right here. It's great. The specials are incredible. $2 Miller Lights, $15 bottomless chips and salsa, $12 pretzel bites, and $16 easy peel shrimp. Now, they've also got this awesome game that Adam and I witnessed a couple of weeks ago. It's the Home Field Advantage Spin and Win Contest, where bettors who place a qualifying game day bet in the Bet River Sportsbook enter the Spin to Win contest, which is held every Eagles home game. You just enter by placing at least a $50 bet on pro football. Maximum number of entries per wager is 3 per transaction. 8 winners are selected via random drawing to spin the wheel. The prizes include free play, cash, and 2 tickets to an Eagles home game. And if the Eagles win, 2 more winners will be selected. So far this year, a lot of 2 more winners have been selected as the Eagles are 8-1. And don't forget, they've got the Choose the Champs Weekly Pick'em Challenge for Rush Rewards members to get 1 free entry each week. Free play prizes are awarded to the top 20 finishers. First place wins $1,000 in free play. All that here at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook, where Philly loves a winner. As for the game, the Eagles are once again favorites. Now, their historic streak of being favored by double digits 3 straight weeks is now over. So that was a historic thing last week. That's done. They are still 6.5-point favorites, over under a 44. So make sure that you come down here to Rivers Casino and Sportsbook and place your bets, or watching at home, you got the Bet Rivers app, make your wager there. Quick question, because somebody was asked this today, and maybe you guys would know more. Frank Reich, former Colts coach, he is fired. He has ties to the Eagles organization from his time here, and also he used to be Nick Sirianni's head coach when Sirianni was the offense coordinator there. Does Frank Reich give advice to the Eagles today? Someone asked, and I love that question. It's a decent question.
Yes.
Not that they don't watch tape,
it's such
obviously.
a dilemma.
No, that happens.
Yeah.
That type of thing happens when you have friendships and there's a phone call away.
Right.
I'm sure that
Like
that
stuff that's
conversation's
not
happened.
obvious on tape. Of course, the Eagles are going to watch tape. They know what they want to do,
Yeah.
but maybe Frank knows a few things.
Yeah.
Well, he knows
don't
about, yes, he knows some things from being with people every day, how they're going to react.
Right.
That's different from just a technique thing on tape. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
it will never come out. It'll never be,
Right.
because he has to worry about getting a job in the future.
Nick will
right? So
deny,
it
Nick will
won't come
deny
out.
it Every way, shape, or form.
Frank
Exactly.
who? Nicholas said, I haven't talked to Frank
Yeah.
in you
but
know,
that type of
hours.
thing happens. Yeah, and
You know, I love Frank. We'll get together after the season.
exactly.
You know, yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Just,
I mean, that's
just like Vic Fangio was just kind of sort of hanging around there in
Plus,
training camp for a
Frank
little
is
bit.
still being paid.
Right.
Just because you get fired doesn't mean they owe him the money. The coach's contracts are guaranteed unless they violate it.
Right.
No, he's got to get paid.
Who was the coach who got fired? This was with the Patriots, right? Was it Bill O'Brien a few years ago, and then he started working for the Patriots by the end of the year? Somebody.
Josh McDaniels.
Josh McDaniels, that's who it was. Okay.
Many years ago.
Yes,
that's
They've
what it was.
adjusted
That's
the
what it
rule
was,
about
yeah.
when you can come back. I
Right,
haven't seen
right.
the language in it.
Okay.
But the fact of Matt Patricia also. Matt Patricia did it. In fact,
That's the one I think I was thinking
Matt
of,
Patricia's
yeah.
the most recent one. He did consult after he was fired. I don't remember exactly when he came back. Matt Patricia now is calling the plays.
For the Patriots offense.
Yeah, which is almost
Which isn't
hard to
very
believe.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, another topic that has come up this week because of this game. Actually, it's a league-wide topic. I wanted to get your opinion on it. A lot of outcry or backlash from players on the playing surfaces in the NFL, not all being natural grass. The Eagles today are playing at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, which is a field turf surface, if I'm not mistaken. I wanted to get your opinion on this, and if you feel the NFL should kind of legislate all grass surfaces, or are you okay? Are there some surfaces you didn't like playing on? I know your hometown field, Soldier Stadium, gets a lot of flack.
I'll say this, is that natural grass is way better than artificial. More injuries happen on artificial. It's proven scientifically. The studies show that, right? Because you're putting so much force into the ground and it has nowhere to go because underneath that surface is concrete.
Right.
Right? So all that energy comes back into your body when
Right.
it just dissipates into the ground. So that's been proven. So would I love to see that? It's very, very hard to maintain a grass field the entire season, especially when you have multiple teams playing on it, like the Giants and the Jets or the
Chargers
Eagles and
and
the
Temple,
Temple.
right.
It's very, very hard to maintain that, and it's very, very costly. But would I love to see everyone go natural grass? Yes. But I think that certain areas, and now we're starting to get into science, but it's hard to maintain that the entire year. And some stadiums are below the ground, above the ground. It's so much nuance to it.
Did you, as a player, have concerns about specific stadiums and grass or surfaces, I should say, when you played on it?
I feel old, but I remember AstroTurf, and that's the only thing I hated. I hated playing in the Metrodome. I hated playing.
Wow,
yeah.
that's an old
So you hated playing in places like that had AstroTurf. So other than that, I was fine.
I remember when you guys would play at Soldier Field, there was always concern about that surface and the level of cleat that you guys wanted to use?
You weren't I wasn't concerned with injury at Soldier Field. We were just concerned with slipping and falling and sliding everywhere.
Well, that can sometimes cause injury.
Yeah, it could cause.
But I know what
injury.
you're saying. You weren't concerned about planting and cutting.
Yeah, planting and cutting. Like most of the times, like you worry about that on turf. Like on turf, you're conscious when you're getting tackled of trying to get your cleat out of the ground.
Right.
Right. That's on my mind.
Right.
When I'm on grass, I'm not really thinking of that because the grass gives.
Right.
The turf is unforgiving.
Gotcha.
Did you see the game in Germany last week? How many players were falling and slipping?
Yes.
That was bad. They should have had that solved before they played that game.
Yeah, so that's one of those things that you like, hey, get your cleat out of the ground.
We've heard this from players, but I feel like this year more than ever, maybe it's Cooper Kupp just got hurt and some of the more prominent players getting hurt. Do you think something will change out of this? Because now the NFLPA is starting to
They have
put
their
out
study,
messaging more.
right,
and
they're not happy with the surface in Germany. In fact, London for years, the players would complain. In fact,
They had big
the
gaps.
coaches,
Big gaps.
and then you saw Pete Carroll talked about it after their game against the Bucks. Players are slipping all the time. You can't have that. I don't know why they can't solve this issue.
Yeah. I remember Andy Reid. We saw the game the Eagles played in Arizona earlier this year, which is a grass field, but they do it on the trays where they put the trays together.
It never sticks.
Yeah.
Arizona is bad because the grass constantly there's always big chunks of grass missing after plays because the grass never sits because it's really artificial because you bring it in on a tray, bring it back in, it never settles.
Right. We saw that. You remember seeing those spots on the field that look different color than the rest of the field.
Yeah, they're putting sand in it. And then spray paint.
Yeah, Andy was not happy. In fact, he rarely does this. He went on the record and said, "You guys saw it. Butker, their kicker, got hurt, and the corner, was it McDuffie, the first-round pick?
Yeah,
They both got hurt in that game. Both had ankle injuries, or I think one went about a hamstring. I know Butker had an ankle And he's like, this is ridiculous. You guys saw it.
Yeah.
He said, watch the tape. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And he's like, when he says something like that, you know it's pretty serious.
Well, we'll see if anything happens. I mean, I feel like it's one of the things that's every once in a while it comes up, there's backlash, and then the NFL says, too bad.
Right.
So we'll see if...
Then you forget about it.
We're the owners. We have the stadiums. We'll do our jobs there. All right. Let's move back to the game here. Most Eagles fans cannot stand the thought of Dallas unless it's Dallas Goedert. But now most Eagles fans can't stand the thought of not having Dallas Goedert for the next 4 weeks. But they will have to get used to that. He's on the IR with a shoulder injury. You know, you and I believed going into this year, we were pretty outspoken that we felt Dallas Goedert would be mentioned among the names like Kelsey and Kittle and Waller, and maybe in some regards better at doing things that some of those guys do. I felt like he was on his way to his first Pro Bowl. And we'll see what happens, but do you agree?
This is his first year without Hurts for a full-time basis, and we thought he'd break out. He also, I remember talking to Mike Rowe when he was the Eagles OC. Mm-hmm. He said that, like, the day they got him in 2018 in OTAs, he wanted to block.
Right.
Because most guys at tight end want to come in and catch it. He called him nosy. He goes, man, I love like his attitude. And here you are 4 years later having a breakout season. He was headed before this injury for 85 to 90 receptions, probably 5 or 6 touchdowns. And he's everything they thought he would be.
Sure.
Unfortunately, he has had injury history.
Some of the base numbers that everybody looks at every day obviously back that up. He's 4th in receptions for tight ends, 2nd in receiving yards, leading the all tight ends in yards per catch at 12.7. But I think some of the advanced stats really show his importance too. For example, 31 first downs. That's 2nd among all tight ends. Yards after the catch, 361. Leads all tight ends. We know that's his specialty. Wow. And Jalen Hurts' passer rating to Dallas Goedert this year is 128.3. That's 3rd best for a quarterback throwing to a tight end. He's also number 1 in yards per target. So it's easy to say Dallas Goedert's a really good tight end. He catches a lot of passes. He blocks well. But I want to ask you guys.
Sucks.
He's also fundamentally important to everything they do on offense, whether it's running, RPO game, receiving. And as good as Jack Stoll is, I have to think that they are a different offense just without him on the field. They will be. Do you agree with that? They will look differently.
Well, what we don't know is if they change things that they do. Mm-hmm. That's what we don't know. But obviously, Jeff, anytime you lose a really good player and you put in a player who's not as good, it's going to be different.
Sure.
As I said, the main question is, and this will be hard to know just off one game because they're playing a specific team that plays a specific way versus, you know, what will happen over the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Right.
We don't know that. Do they change the kinds of things that they do, or do they not do certain things in their playbook?
Right.
That's basically
what
I'm saying.
Getting at.
Right.
Yeah. Of course, if you lose Deshaun Jackson and you put Mac Hollins in, yes, you know you're not getting something.
Right.
But it doesn't change, maybe, Jason, philosophically what you are. This might have to make the Eagles think twice about what they do.
This is my assessment or my prediction.
Okay.
It'll make the Eagles more predictable. Because when you have a guy that's as talented at pass catching as Cal Katera and Tyree Jackson, you want to use those guys for their strengths. Mm-hmm. So now when those guys are in the game, it's going to be a high percentage of passes that go to those guys. And a guy like Stoll, who can catch but is not the best runner, not the best route runner, but is a very good blocker, it will lend to, if he's the only tight end in the game, he's probably not going to be the pass target, right? So when it comes to those things, I think it will make us a little bit more predictable. Dallas Goedert is one of the few tight ends in the league that is equally good in both sides of the ball, of both running and passing. It's a shame because this was his Pro Bowl year, and the thing is that you can play a football game through him. And I don't think that we've had that enough.
Right, no, that's a great point.
And that's when you can kind of decipher who's the elite of the elite. Because Travis Kelce, you can play a game through him.
Right.
Darren Waller, you can play a game through him.
Meaning running the offense through him.
Through him, yes. Right. He's the first option. He's the first target. Our offense is designed to get him the ball, and you will win the game by doing so. And I think that Goedert is that guy. Most tight ends you can't do that with.
I'm very curious to see how much they use Calcaterra, because I remember him very well. I watched him when he was at Oklahoma, And at that point, he was being talked about as the next kind of tight end because he's very athletic. He has vertical seam ability. You know, he can run after catch. And then he got hurt. I guess he had a bad concussion, and he took the year off.
Yep.
And then he popped up at what was SMU, I believe.
Yeah.
And I watched his tape at SMU. He's an athlete now. He can run and he can catch. Now, he's not an inline blocker. You know, and look, the Eagles' run game is very multiple. He can still be on the field when they run the ball. They'll spread it out and run the ball.
Sure.
You know, you might see that more so they can get Calcaterra on the field.
Sure.
Because he does present some issues for the defense because he does have vertical seam ability.
Right.
So I'm very anxious to see, one, how much they use him. We don't know the answer to that until it happens. And two, how they use him. Because he's an athlete.
Against the cover 3 today, that is the seam buster for zone defense like that, is getting someone who could run. And Goedert, by the way, he saw what he did against Houston in Houston's cover 2.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, it's
By the way, keep a couple of things in mind.
Yeah.
Gus Bradley is the D coordinator.
Right. Cover 3.
But they play a lot more cover
cover
1 than you think.
Ah, okay.
They're about 6th or 7th in the NFL percentage-wise in cover 1. Now, they're a single high safety defense because when you add cover 1 and cover 3, that's their predominant coverage, okay? And predominant is a relative word. It's not as if they play that 95%
No,
of the time.
they can get into some cover 4.
Yeah, they'll get into some 4 as well. But they play a lot more man than you might, particularly on third down. They play a lot of man on third down. So just keep that in mind. Now, that could be a function of having Gilmore this year.
Sure.
Question: was Shaq Leonard on linebackers a lot over the years?
On tight ends.
Tight ends.
Yeah. Who would be on the tight ends?
No, he's not normally because they used him a lot. Don't forget, it's a different coordinator.
Yeah, with Gus. Yeah.
Right. It was Matt
Eberflus
Eberflus
before that, right.
who, by the way, also played a lot of man coverage on third down. So Shaq Leonard's normally was not the tight end matchup. No.
Okay. Because they gave up a ton of production. They're number 1 in the NFL against receivers in terms of production. They're not very good.
No, they have really good corners, good veteran corners. I'll say this now. So here's the other caveat to losing Dallas. Is now, do we see Devontae Smith get the ball more? Or do we see Quez Watkins get
Just
the ball
about to ask you that. How do you compensate? Is it just as simple as give the ball to that person more, or schematically, Jay, do they have to try to figure out a way to get more yardage from non-wide receiver positions or non-pass catch, traditional pass
that's
catch?
the thing. It all depends on if Stoll is a winner or the guy that's in there as tight end. Are they winning? Are they productive? If not, you can see more personnel switches. Like there's a personnel that we ran a lot when I was there that would take the tight end off the field and you in passing situations and you would put a receiver there and we would call it E. And now I play the tight end position and there's still a running back, 2 running backs or whatever in the game. So there's different formations you can use that Goedert would be in, but now Quez is running it, right? Because all these positions can be interchanged. It depends on who's the most effective, or Devontae Smith can be there. Right. So you can use the inside guy like a tight end if you wanted to in passing situations.
Tyree Jackson becomes a little bit interesting only because for a guy who was converted from quarterback to tight end and then last year in training camp started to make some catches, open some eyes. I remember you saying that some of the feedback you were getting on Tyree was that he was more of an adequate blocker than you might think for someone.
They were surprised. They were, because some of the stuff they didn't really teach him.
Right.
I guess he watched a lot of tape. He didn't embarrass himself for a guy who'd never played tight end before.
Right.
He's 6'7". I think he's up to 260. Last time we checked.
He looked very big when we saw him in Miami.
We saw him in Miami for practice, and he was doing just gassers up and back, just trying to stay in shape. We're like, holy smokes, did he put a lot of weight?
No, he actually this summer came and watched tape with me.
Okay.
And he's a big dude.
He is big.
He's a big dude.
Not just tall though. I mean, he looked upper body big.
He's a great kid too. Great kid.
How about throwing to the running backs a little bit? Because the screen was a big part. The tight end screen had become a big part of their offense.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I wonder if we could see, I'm playing off what Jay's saying, if we could see a pony package, whether you see 20 personnel, maybe you have Sanders and Gainwell on the field, and you have 3 wide receivers. So you see 20 personnel.
Right.
All of those things are possible, but remember, all these plays can adapt like that.
Right.
It's just a
concept.
It's the concept. Each guy on the field, if you're in this spot, you do this route.
Right.
That's what their offense is. If you're in this spot, you do this route. So now you're just playing with the people that are doing the routes that's there.
Right.
Yeah. So give me an idea on a week basis when you only have a week for practice and you lose a guy who's not only good, but you sort of run your offense through him, and now we bring up all these things you can do. How much can you realistically do within a week that's going to counter for what you're missing?
Yeah.
Like we're all sitting here tossing out all these ideas, but that's a lot.
You can do a bunch.
Okay.
You can do a bunch because now you just are heavy. You're heavy personnel switching.
Gotcha.
Right? So, and that can be done easily, right? Because now E personnel, Quiz is at the Y or the E position. He's at the tight end position. And and they've been doing this the entire year.
Right.
You know, it's just that the volume may have to switch. Or they'll say a personnel, like they'll say Zebra Calcaterra. Calcaterra's in this, Zebra Tyree Jackson in this position. Or like those things will happen. And this is exactly how it goes, right? So Tyree, these are your set of plays. Calcaterra, these are your set of plays. Stowe, these are your set of plays.
Right.
That happens without that's very easy.
Sure. Pretty big challenge for an offensive play calling tree, whether you want to say it's Shane Steichen, you want to give Kevin Patullo, the pass game specialist, some props there, or even Nick Sirianni. This is probably, for the first time this year, their big challenge, Adam, of trying to figure out their offensive design without their biggest piece
this
there.
Is hard. This is hard. He sets it up.
It's not going to change dramatically because you only have a week.
That's what I was getting at.
Right.
But over time, though. But over time.
But the point, because it's all concepts, Jeff.
Right.
It's all, keep this in mind. In any given situation, you're not waiting to get, 25 different play possibilities. So let's say it's 3rd and 6 plus. Okay, there's 5 concepts that are going to you're going to get from that, not 25.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're right. So you're just. I've had these conversations with quarterbacks where I say, okay, so what happens on 1st and 10? And they'll say, well, we're going to run 5 different things. Okay, what happens when it's 3rd and long? Well, we have 5 different things. It's all concepts, and you're just plugging people in to the concept.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes you're just forced to play a lesser player.
Exactly.
So you'll still run it. You just
Still run it.
results.
You're just forced to play a lesser player.
Maybe instead of getting the 15 yards, you got 8 yards, and then you go
So
from there.
that's a big part of his game. Is
Run after the catch. Yeah, and the blocking. Some of Jalen Hurts' best runs came with on an RPO where Dallas thought he was going to be maybe getting the ball, then he became a blocker. And we'll just have to see how that part of their offense shapes up.
Don't forget when Dallas Goedert would catch a ball. Let's say they're going to run an RPO concept, and Goedert, is going to just flare out to the outside, and they throw him the ball.
Yeah,
you can do. That's not based on Dallas Goedert.
Right.
You can do that with Jack Stoll.
Right.
That's a concept.
Sure.
That's not, hey, we're doing this to get the ball to Dallas Goedert. Yes, maybe he runs for 10 more yards than Jack Stoll might, but it doesn't mean you can't run the play.
Yeah. The screen game is specific to Dallas Goedert.
Right.
Because you don't throw receiver screens to tight ends in
Very
general.
often. Yes.
But there's only a few guys, like Kelsey you can do that with, Goedert you can do that with, because they're so good at yards after the catch. So they're special in that way. And I'll say this, is that the receivers lost their matchup for the first time.
You're a segue master. This is
sorry.
the next part of the script.
Okay,
Keep going. I wanted to ask you about this because you said it on Q&A. First time you can remember.
The first time this year the receivers lost their matchup, and I thought that the William Jackson deviation or getting him out of there kind of solidified their secondary.
Sure.
And everyone knows what they're doing, and they're aggressive in their zones. And I thought the Eagles didn't match their intensity. Just think about it, like against the Steelers on a deep ball against what's his name? Fitzpatrick. Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
The deep ball down the middle of the field. You saw A.J. Brown go up above him in order to make the play. The same exact play where a safety was in position to make the play, A.J. Brown was slowing down, right? He could have went up above the safety to make that play. He let the ball come down to him. Now the safety is the aggressor. Little things like that where balls were being batted down because Kendall Fuller was able to recognize it and our guys didn't take a step back to the ball. Devontae Smith had a wide open curl route. He didn't take a step back to the ball. Their defenders were more aggressive to the ball than ours. And it was very weird and bizarre to see. And it was the first time I've seen it all year. And it doesn't make it better that they're going to play one of the best secondaries, corner-wise, in the National Football League this week.
Definitely. By the way, on a totally separate note, because it's now 2 times they played Commanders, they're done with them. I have felt even though the Commanders got rocked the first game, I think St. Juste and Fuller are pretty good active corners. I mean, they're physical, they're tough. I think you might have been onto something with them saying goodbye to William Jackson, because I feel like Washington's got, we keep saying this, they're a quarterback and maybe some offensive linemen away, but I like some of their defensive personnel.
I like St. Juste a lot.
Yeah.
Now, he's long, he's always in position.
Yeah.
He's like, we were making Pro Bowl level plays versus Washington. Devontae Smith, the one that he caught that wasn't really
in the
a
first
catch
game, right.
in the first game, that was an amazing over the shoulder, out of the bounds catch.
Right.
The one that he went up against Kendall Fuller and the safety that was running in position where he went up, that was a Pro Bowl catch.
Sure.
The one that he shouldn't have thrown, it was a corner route and he went up over the top, that's a Pro Bowl level catch. They had to play above and beyond the call of duty in order to make a lot of those plays.
Right.
Which talks about how good the secondary were in position, but the guy just made a better play.
Yeah.
So there's going to be games where it doesn't work like that and the secondary wins that matchup because it's a 50-50 toss-up.
Sure.
This game, they won those.
Right. Let's go back to what you pointed out, the A.J. Brown. I'm glad you set that up that way. Steelers makes the catch. This game against Washington, it's intercepted. Similar route concepts, I believe, and similar defensive structures. I think they were both against cover 3.
Because
I want to ask you about the decision making on both, because I know the way that was set up.
You're
Devontae
talking about
Smith.
the interception?
The touchdown against the Steelers, but then, yes, the interception against Washington. Both were, I believe, similar play concepts where Devontae Smith really is supposed to be open on the deep crosser.
Yeah. So that's the deep cross concept, right? They were in
Post cross.
Post
cross.
Yeah, deep cross concept.
Yeah.
So deep cross is the deep cross in the post.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that concept, and then you have your flat route. So that concept is mainly for cover 3.
Yep.
They were in cover 3. It looked like cover 4, but they were in cover 3. The safety played it. He took one step
right, yeah,
to the deep cross, but he wasn't out of position.
Right.
But Jalen Hurts thought that he can get it over his head.
Right.
Here's the thing. Cover 3, most of the time when you see cover 3, you eliminate the post. The coach tells you to eliminate the post. It's just an alert just in case somebody makes a mistake.
Right.
He feels like if he doesn't make a mistake or if it's in between, I can throw it to A.J. Brown. I don't blame him because A.J. Brown been winning all year.
Yeah. But to your point, in the first one, the Steelers, wasn't A.J. Brown sort of surprised that the ball, and then he kind of
Are you talking about the touchdown?
The touchdown that he caught.
Yeah, because that was dagger, and to me, I think the ball should have gone to Smith on the
This is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
He's making, it looks like the right decision because it was a touchdown and it was a great play
I thought it was the wrong throw, but that's just me.
So
I don't know
that's
how
what
they
I was
coach
getting
it.
at. Is he trusting these guys a little bit too much in that regard?
So this concept should have went to Devontae Smith. Now, Devontae Smith didn't win his
didn't do a good
matchup
job
that great.
getting
He
over
didn't
it,
the guy was too close for him for a deep cross. The deep cross with Devontae Smith's speed and his route running ability should never be close to you on a deep cross all the way to the other side of the field.
Right.
But I don't blame him for throwing the ball to A.J. Brown. I believe that this is what you bring in big-time players to do. Like, you don't bring in big-time players to drop the ball.
Right.
You bring them to make a play.
Right.
Here's what I thought watching the play, because I made a note of it. I'm not in Jalen Hurts' head, obviously, but I know from talking to coaches how they coach when you see safeties and to try to go over the top of them.
Right.
My sense is that, and I typed this, that Hurts believed that the post safety Forrest would not be a factor on the throw based on his depth and body positioning.
Yeah, he took one step to it.
Right, because he was kind of leaning forward and he wasn't deep.
Okay.
So I think he thought, hey, I can get it over the top of it. And by the way,
he did.
Forrest, he did get over the top of it.
Yeah.
He did. And Forrest has struggled, by the way, and obviously they were watching Commanders tape up to the game. Forrest had struggled in that. He's really much more of a box type player.
Right.
He's not a deep end player. So, he doesn't have that change of direction and ability to turn and run. And you can make the argument that Forrest made an unbelievably great play. It was a perfectly thrown ball.
Sure.
And by the way, Hurts is a really good deep thrower. He's taken such a jump. His accuracy and decision making, phenomenal.
The thing is that I thought Jalen Hurts played a good game.
Yeah.
I really did. I looked at it. I'm looking at the game. I'm like, Jalen Hurts is playing a good game. He's been betrayed by some people on his team right now.
Because the first half, they hardly had the ball. There was no way to get into any rhythm whatsoever. And I thought in the second half, their offense looked pretty good.
Yeah. I don't think any one of us sitting here thinks that if Quez Watkins holds on to that ball and scores a touchdown, that the Eagles lose. Do you guys think they still lose? I think that their percentages of winning that game
goes
have been
high.
so high
Right.
if he scores that touchdown.
Here's the thing. This is why you're always aggressive to the ball. You don't let the ball come to you. In that situation, because the way that I can't remember if it was St. Juice. I believe it was St. Juice. Whoever was playing A.J. Brown at that moment, could have been Fuller, but I think it was St. Juice. If he goes up, St. Juice was on his back, and it was almost a borderline pass interference. If he goes up, it's 100% pass interference. Just by him attacking the ball, you're going to throw the guy out of the air. His momentum is going forward. He's stopping to go back up in the air. You always go get the ball because you're going to increase your chance to catch it, and you're going to increase your chance to get a pass interference.
Right.
That's why you can't sit there and let the ball come to you.
So just to sum it up, though, do you like the fact that Jalen, who's doing a great job throwing the deep ball, has made the decision in those regards to maybe not take the deep over there, which is open, more so against Pittsburgh, and then go deep to AJ like that in double coverage?
I thought that it was an aggressive decision, and I'm never going to stop that as a coach. Because if Jalen Hurts comes back to me and says, I know that it was cover 3, but the guy was playing flat, and I can get the ball over him, I love that freaking answer.
All right.
And that's the right answer, by the way.
So my complicated response to that would be, you're the defensive coordinator today. You are Gus Bradley. You play a lot of cover 3. You've seen that tendency. Can you tell your safeties and corners to look a certain way to try to bait Jalen into throwing that pass again, leave the deep over, and let him try to throw it up top, and then in their mind, they know I'm going to throw that pass. So I'm going to lean a little bit too, and then retreat, hoping he tries to throw it over my head.
I think maybe you could try to scheme it. I just think that's a situational thing. I don't know if that play is going to come up that much. Now, deep cross, he's thrown a lot of interceptions on the deep cross concept. He's thrown 3, should have been 4, on just the play call
just the deep cross itself.
It was once in the Jaguars. The guy from the Cardinals dropped it.
Right.
This one, and it was one more. So he has a lot of interceptions on this play, but this is how you coach this. You say, man, I enjoy your aggressiveness. If you're unsure about it, anything, Devontae Smith's going to win this 100% of the time.
Gotcha.
Take that, So it is what it is.
All right.
But
The inactives are out. Tyree Jackson, as expected, is active.
Right.
He'll be active. The inactives are only 5 of them. Ian Book, Josh Jobe, who was out anyway, Trey Sermon, inactive again, Josh Sills, and Suh Peta. That's it.
All right. Man, Trey Sermon, he's probably wondering what he's got to do. I mean, they already have 3 healthy running backs.
Yeah.
By the way, how does anybody – listen, I get it. We say it all the time. Coaches do what they do for a reason. Doesn't mean sometimes it can't stick out as kind of strange, but the Eagles get the ball after the sack strip to start the game, and the first carry goes to Boston Scott.
It was very weird.
I just wonder, what the thinking. I'm sure there's a rational thought behind it.
Of course there is.
I just wonder what it is.
If I were you, I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about that.
But that's what we do. It's you have he's technically
weird.
your 3rd running back,
weird.
even if it was a goal line or it was a 10-yard, 11-yard carry. Usually that's where Gainwell gets the carry.
Just as a general point, we're spending a lot, we just spoke about Hurts. Keep one thing in mind. This team runs the ball really well, and keep that 11-yard touchdown pass to Devonta Smith, that drive, they got back on track running the ball.
Yeah.
It scored twice in 6 minutes in the first half.
Right, but they got back on track with their offense by running the ball.
4.7 yards.
And I made a note here that was 7 runs, 6 by Sanders for 29 yards on that drive. See, they're able to do that. This takes nothing away from Jalen Hurts, but they have an offense that can run the ball.
Right.
They don't have to rely, as a few too many other teams do in this league, on your quarterback doing everything all the time.
And I have no issue with running the ball. I just couldn't understand why the guy who's 3rd on the
game,
game,
right.
4th actually behind Jalen Hurts when he's talking about running, right?
So this is what happens. As an offensive coordinator and as a head coach, you're always trying to keep guys engaged. So that could have been something where, hey, we haven't gotten Scott a carry in the last few games.
Right.
Or later in the game. Let me get him one early.
And he got 5 yards, so Adam's right. It wasn't a bad play.
Let's get it out of out of the way.
Yeah.
Apparently they did. He never played again.
Yeah, or yeah,
crazy.
exactly, right? So let me get this play and get him out of, whatever. So that happens.
How's that for
sometimes.
being engaged? You got the first carry, and then you sat for the other
You know who's
55 minutes of the game.
who's a
Yeah.
master
Carry.
at that? Coach Reed, because he always has good players and he's trying to figure out. Like, just think about all the receivers they got. They got Darius Toney.
Right.
They have all. You
Yeah.
got a bunch of guys that need the ball, right? You got one quarterback and you're trying to shuffle and get these guys the ball, and sometimes you get that.
It's funny you brought up Coach Reed because the first touchdown that they scored in that game, which has now gone completely by the wayside because they lost, was that was basically a jump pass, a run pass play where
That was
Jalen Hurts
behind
pretended to run,
Right.
jump.
Behind him, yeah.
That
Yeah.
was the play he tried to run with Ronnie Brown in 2011,
Run
right?
pass
Remember the
option
run
right at
pass
the goal line.
where Ronnie
Yeah.
got confused and he's back to the end zone and he's lateraling it and
I
Coach
was in
got
North Dakota
killed.
who asked him that. I said, hey, Ronnie, was that a run pass option? He said, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I just didn't execute it. Okay.
All
Dude,
these
this
years
is
later,
obvious.
they finally executed it.
Scott, by the way, Boston Scott had the least amount of snaps of all their offensive players. He only had 5.
Right.
So maybe to like Jason said, let's get it out of the way. Let's keep it engaged.
Here's the thing, like when you're going to utilize the guys that little, what's the purpose of him being up? When you're going to utilize,
Right,
yeah.
like what's the purpose?
Especially when you're hurting
worried
in some
about injuries.
special teams areas.
Worried about
and-
injuries.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right.
yeah.
He actually
I
didn't
don't-
play on special teams.
That's my point. Like, why is he
Weird.
up? He's not
Yeah.
even playing special
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah, why
He's
not?
giving you
Why
5
not?
snaps.
Why not get a guy that can punt return?
Right. There
Oh,
you go.
It's another
There you
one.
go. Or cover. All right. Check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com or on Twitter at PHLSportsNation. All right, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, talking about the Colts. They are very good defensively, at least in the statistical department. I'm not sure how many people realize that just because I don't know how many people are following the Colts, but I think their record would make you think, prior to last week, would make you think that, they're not very good. There was chaos around the team. But if you look at them, they are 3rd in yards per game allowed, 5th in yards per play, 2nd in rushing yards per play, 10th in sacks per pass attempt, and they are one of the best 3rd down defenses in the league, holding opponents to 33.59 percentage clip. So that's a pretty good team right there. That's pretty good what they're doing defensively. We know Kwity Paye won't play today. What kind of year was Kwity Paye having, in your estimation? Because they had
He had
big,
some
big
flashes.
expectations.
Yeah, he had
for
some
him.
flashes. But
Okay.
this is a team that, particularly when it comes to pass defense, they're basically built on a 4-man pass rush. It's
Right.
not heavy blitz at all. Okay, as I said, they play more cover 1 than you might think. But they've got Buckner inside and Grover Stewart, who is a really good player. Now, he's not really a pass rusher in a strict sense, but he's a really good player inside, an overlooked player because he's not a sack guy. And Ngakoue can rush the quarterback.
Yeah.
The guy who's ended up being really, really good for them with Shaq Leonard being out is Zay Franklin, the linebacker at 44.
Zaire Franklin.
Zaire Franklin? Okay.
Yeah. He plays literally every snap. He does not come off the field. And he's had a really good year. And Okereke is a really athletic linebacker as well.
Yep.
Our friend Rodney McLeod, he's basically their box safety because they play so much single high.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's been on the
lot of
tight end
veterans
of
in that
the-
secondary.
He's mostly been the tight end guy when they play cover 1.
Right. Julian Blackman, the deep safety?
Well, yeah, they've been kind of mixing and matching him with Rodney Thomas.
Okay.
But Blackman, I think, is starting to take over and
Sure.
play more snaps. And then they've got Gilmore as one corner, and they kind of rotate at the other corner position. I kind of like the Rodgers kid more than Faison.
Okay.
I think Rodgers is a better player.
He's so quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really quick player.
Yeah.
I'll say this. Remember. So Ngakoue gave Malata the blues last year.
I was just about to bring that
Yeah.
up. He did.
He gave him the blues for the Raiders last year. I think he had 3 sacks that game.
I think
It
he
was
did.
2 for sure.
Was that the game where Mailata was playing right tackle for
No,
Lane Johnson?
it was
Or no,
left
he had
tackle.
just moved back to left tackle after
it was
spending
left
some time
left
at
tackle.
right tackle. Yeah.
And
Ngakoue's a bad rusher.
Ngakoue gave him the blues that game.
Yeah, so Crosby and Ngakoue had some good pass rushes against them last year.
So that's a matchup that I'm sure that the defensive coordinator had seen.
Yep.
And will try to probably exploit and test Mailata this week.
It's tough because he's kind of a bendy speed rusher, right?
Oh, for sure.
And Mailata, I think the one thing in pass protection we've talked about, while he has great potential and upside, and he's done very well, is that he tends to struggle a little bit with the really bendy guys around the edge. You've seen that a few times?
A little bit.
And he's also dealing with a shoulder injury still that we don't know how much it's.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Mailata was up last night thinking about this one. I'm sure.
Ngakwe?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. How do you move the ball most efficiently against this defense? Because not a lot of teams have. I think one or two have gotten over 350 on them, but otherwise they've been good.
I think that you're going to have to establish the run in this game. I think that our team is better at it, and I don't know that we're going to win our one-on-one matchups consistently outside.
Okay.
With Gilmore and Kenny Moore, and they like FaceTime, but Rodgers is a pretty quick guy. So
yeah,
I think that it's going to present a lot of challenges for us throwing the ball, and I think that the way that we can is our offensive line is a dominant running offensive line. I think that's the way you move it.
They're not a high percentage blitz team, but Kenny Moore is a really good blitzer
slot
when they
corner?
do blitz. He's a slot corner.
Okay.
He's one of the best slot corners in the league. Really good player.
Yeah.
So that's just something to be aware of in selective situations. But they're
Is Gilmore having a good year? He's always good, but I mean, Steph Gilmore, has he been
good year? Yeah.
Solid.
I'm curious to see if they match him up to A.J. Brown.
Okay.
That I'm curious to see.
It's a potential. He's done it.
Yeah.
He's done it for most of his career.
Yeah.
If they want to isolate, and they can because their defensive structure won't change much
No.
because of the percentage that they play man.
Sure.
So Jason was talking about running the football. The one team that really get them, Jacksonville ran for 243 yards against the Colts. And it wasn't just one guy. They had a bunch of guys run for 50, 60, 70, 80 yards. So we'll see without Goedert, because he's a good run blocker, how do the Eagles approach the first quarter? Because typically you look at the first quarter, that'll tell you if they're going to pass a lot or not. But typically the Eagles come out throwing the ball more than they run it. So we'll see if it changes at all.
Yeah, and you're missing Shaq Leonard, right? So that's the added dimension to it. Jonathan, Josh Jacobs had a few good runs last week. So I think that Miles Sanders can make some hay, and our offensive line's a lot better than theirs.
All right. Allow us, please, a second to tell you about our fantastic production team. It's Public Square and Rebel Hill, and they are back on Inside the Birds Pregame Live. The team of James and Zach are back behind the controls, bringing Inside the Birds to you in high definition with great graphics, videos, and more. They even make Greg Cosell look really good. I mean, these guys are miracle workers. Just kidding.
But you're right about that.
Please contact Public Square and Rebel Hill. You gotta love self-deprecating humor. It's the best type of humor.
He really does.
It's really the only type of humor we can have, right? Making fun.
I
of
got
myself.
a face for radio. What can I say?
There you go.
Except for the matchup show, yes.
Yeah.
Contact Public Square Media and Rebel Hill Productions to produce your webcast, podcast, live show, or anything else you can dream of, because this team can bring it to life. All right, so just finishing off on the front, you like the Eagles matchup against the Colts as far as offensively in the trenches, establishing a run and getting that going, because they've come out, as Adam, we've talked about, they've come out pass happy in almost every game so far without Goedert here and with some issues that they've had on defense.
And then run. And it looks like it's balanced, but without Goedert, I'm really interested to see what the coach's approach is and how they deploy the personnel. Because you could say all you want, they're going to run their concepts, but when you don't have Dallas Goedert, you can't do everything you want to do.
Right.
And who's that guy who's going to be the factor? Who's the third? Because remember, it was Goedert, Brown, and then Smith. Well, you take Goedert out, who's more or less your 1 or 1A.
Right.
Is it Quez, as you were talking about before? And will they take more shot plays? This is a tough defense to do it against. So they're great against receivers, but it's going to be a challenge.
All right, it will be a challenge, and that's a great question. Who's going to be the person that steps up? Is there someone that you would invest in if you were today using the sports stock market known as Mojo? We talk about Mojo all the time. You get to invest in your favorite players. You turn your sports knowledge into money with Mojo, the sports stock market. I always say I don't know anything about Fortune 500 companies, so I don't mess with the stock market, but I know pass catchers, quarterbacks, running backs, all of that, skill position players. That's why I invest with Mojo. Every share you get into a player entitles you to a guaranteed payout based on career-ending stats. There are no off days. There's no off season. Anything can happen from January to December that can impact a player's share price. They can rise and fall constantly, and you can cash out at any time. It's better than fantasy football because you can just build your portfolio as large as you want. There's no opponent here. No one's going to beat you on a week-to-week basis. It's all about you and your ability to turn your investments and get some heavy returns on them. They've got a great multiplier tab where you can multiply your investment by 5, 10, 15% at any given week. So here's how it works. They offer 300 skill position players from quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And they've got a guaranteed payout formula that is based on objective stats, so you always know what the stock is worth. If you think there's an underrated rookie who's a rising star, hey, go long. Take your shot and see what happens. So Mojo is available in New Jersey on iOS, and just by downloading the app, you'll have a chance to win up to $10,000 in free shares of player stock. Just click the link in the description box on this YouTube video for a chance to win up to $10,000 in free shares of player stocks. You got to be 21 or older, physically located in New Jersey to trade on Mojo. If you have a gambling problem, help's available at 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, for this game, we just talked about a lot of injuries, Adam. Quez Watkins, even though he fumbled big time,
He can run.
he was up 4.9% because of last week. He caught 4 catches. That catch still stood. It was a 50-yard catch, I believe.
It was.
He had 4 catches for 80 yards. You like Quez Watkins with Dallas Goedert out here?
But it's still, I mean, he said it went up, what,
shot play guy.
5%, 4%?
Yeah, which is pretty decent. And if you look at comparable to other players.
I would say of the group, Devontae Smith's over time, at least for the 4 games, Goddard might be out. In fact, he should be out longer than 4 weeks. But he's definitely going to return before the end of the season, that we know.
Right.
I would think Smith's the one. Again, this is the first game. This is a good secondary. But
Okay.
over time, Smith's the guy who's going to get the ball. Because you could also move him around.
Right.
But Quez is a little bit one-dimensional.
Right.
He's not really a possession receiver. I know they'll line him up in the slot, but he's a vertical slot. So Devontae Smith, he can move all over the field. And look, he also should be getting the ball more. Let's go like
Well,
this.
interesting point, because Devontae Smith, just to show you how this is not fantasy football where you get a touchdown and everything's great, he only had 6 catches for 39 yards last week. His stock was actually down minus 0.56, but maybe that's a good thing. You get him while his price starts to drop, and if you really think he's going to have some pretty good games here. I mean, is Devontae Smith the guy to you guys over the next 4 weeks that probably sees more of an
More
impact,
targets?
more of a stat sheet type of impact because of no Dallas Goedert?
I think it'll be him and Quez. I think Quez deserves to get more reps. I know he fumbled this past game. I understand the fumble, but I know that that's receiver and empathy for a receiver. That's more so than anything else, right? The guy catches the ball, he sees the guy that he thought, overrun, so he looks left and then doesn't see the guy behind him. So you understand it, but I think his production is only going to go up, and I agree with you. I think it's going to be a mix between Devontae Smith and Quez. And what happens from an offensive coordinator's standpoint, you have it in your mind the number of plays that you have for these guys that are the number 1 target.
Right.
And now that just makes Devontae Smith plays go up, or Quez get more plays, which he hadn't had a bunch, right? That they become the number 1 target. Doesn't mean they're going to get the ball.
Sure.
But they're the number 1 target. And they have my song playing in the background.
I'm kind of curious.
Can't hear it.
And then I got a question for you, actually. But I'm kind of curious about Zach Pascal now in all this. Because I think he's kind of a steady, reliable player.
Yeah.
Not that he's replacing Dallas Goedert. He's not necessarily a tight end. But he's kind of one of those steady, reliable targets.
He's going to catch the ball.
Yeah.
He's going to work to get open. He's going to be in the field when you throw tunnel screens and need him to block, so you might as well get him more acclimated into the offense, right? So that's why the play worked so effectively when he caught the touchdown, because he never gets the ball.
Right.
One thing with Zach Pascal is he's really good in the red zone. In fact, he scored most of his touchdowns with like the 10-yard line.
Yeah.
He's a big, 6'6", 6'1", 6'1.5". Remember, we know why he's here, because of the head coach, and he can block, and he's a big body. So yeah, you're right, he can handle it.
And that goes back to the point we made about, well, if you're going to start doing some different things or new things, at least this is a guy you've coached for several years now. It won't be hard to really get him acclimated.
Here's the thing, though. Can Zach Pascal uncover better than Quez, Devontae, and A.J. Brown?
No.
And now, unless you're in zone. Zone doesn't matter.
Right. Maybe better than Quez, because and you would know better, but I think maybe better than Quez, because I think Pascal is kind of a savvy guy. I think he knows how to do that.
Yep.
Zach Pascal has showed some uncoverability. I don't think that he does it better than Quez. I don't think that Quez gets the opportunity.
Right, that may be true as well.
Yeah, so I don't think that Quez is ever in the progression of the quarterback on these routes. I believe that here's the thing about the NFL that really grinds my gears. You get slotted as a player in the coach's minds.
Yep.
And they use you for that thing and won't let you outside of that box sometimes.
And you think Quez has been that guy now?
I think Quez is that guy, that he is fast, and they say, okay, we can use him for these things and not other things.
Not other things, but you believe he can do.
Which I believe that he can do other things.
Correct.
What else? What else?
So
would you
for
like
an
to see him
example, like you can use Quez on some one-on-one matchups, some
Right.
one-on-one routes. He can win those. He can win a one-on-one
Right.
situation. Like, yeah, I believe that. But
Because he's caught a lot of deep balls here against zone coverage.
yeah.
Yes.
And you're going to say, okay, Quez can take the top off of defense, so let's use him for that. And you limit him to that. Sort of like guys like Emmanuel Sanders when he was in the Steelers. You had him in a role. You put him in Denver with Peyton Manning. Now, oh my gosh, he's a good player.
Right.
No, he just
and
wasn't
even
used properly.
even in Buffalo for a year.
Exactly. He just wasn't used the same way.
Zach Pascal's a knowledge player. He's got the
And you got to have
full
tact.
understanding. Right.
You got to have, when you're a guy like that, you got to have tact. So that's there.
Right.
Knowledge reigns supreme.
Yeah.
All right, over nearly everybody. Let us talk about, let's get into our Game Time Watches segment, all right? Brought to you by Game Time Watches. It's the leader in licensed sports watches. Get your favorite NFL, NHL, or MLB team logo watch now at GameTimeWatch.com. Eagles fans, Game Time Watches is partnered with Inside the Birds, and we're offering a special promo code for 20% off using code ITB20. That's ITB20 for 20% off GameTimeWatches.com. The code applies not just for Eagles watches, not just for NFL watches, but anything not already discounted. A lot of styles to choose from. Men, women, kids. They got the men's varsity style watch, the shiny face, big team color logo, metallic accents, metal case, the thick black silicone strap. All that makes it an everyday style watch. So check out the Varsity Drip Art Edition also at GameTimeWatch.com. We will get into our player to watch segment, courtesy of Game Time Watches. Who is the player to watch today, Jason Avant?
Miles Sanders, because I
so
believe
that
that
run
this is
game's
a
gonna
get
get
back
going.
on track game.
Yep.
I think is going to dictate that we run the football a little bit more because of their secondary, and Miles Sanders.
All right, Miles Sanders is your Game Time Watch player to watch. That's a good one. Greg, who is your player to watch?
I actually thought about this one, Jeff, believe it or not.
So 35 seconds instead of 20? Is that?
Yeah, that would be fair. That would be fair.
Sounds good.
I didn't want to go beyond a minute. Right.
I don't want to make you overwork.
Right.
I
I
don't
don't
want to
want
pay for that.
I don't want to
We don't
overthink.
pay you, but-
Right. So I'm thinking just because Eagles pass rush, I think the Eagles can get ahead in this game. I'm thinking that Matt Ryan's going to put a few up. I guarantee you know this in the DB room. They're going to say we're going to get a few today. Don't you think they're saying that?
Yeah, with him. Yes.
Yeah.
We can
So-
sit on a few routes.
Yeah. So I'm picking Darius Slay.
Darius Slay to have a
Coming
big
off a
bounce
game
back
where he
game.
wasn't at his best.
Wasn't at his
I
best.
think he'll focus this week, and I think he's got a chance to make a pick or two and to make some good plays, critical plays in critical situations.
And again, the philosophy is you expect the pass rush to be better to put him in position to
yes,
jump in front of one.
Yes.
Okay, I love it.
And Matt
that's
Ryan,
the marriage of the front end and the back end.
which
that's what's
well,
missing.
that's what you ultimately want anyway.
Of course,
right.
Complementary football.
I remember when Peyton Manning's arm went bad when I was in Kansas City. He was at Denver. And our secondary was like, he can't throw the ball over 30 yards, so there's no way that we're respecting anything.
So I think,
so we end up with a lot of
and
picks.
Darius, to me, I guess big play is what he goes by.
Yes.
Slay.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah,
Slay.
it's
Don't
just
call him
Slay.
Darius.
Yeah.
Do not call him
Nobody calls him
Right.
Darius.
Nobody
yeah.
calls him Darius.
Yeah.
So big
a
play.
great name,
I
though.
think he's going to be in a situation because I think he's really good at keying and seeing and understanding routes versus quarterback drops.
All right.
I think he's a really savvy, smart player that way.
You just went Walt Frazier on us, didn't you? A little keying and seeing.
There you go.
Ewing is irking and lurking.
That
sounds
you're,
like-
you're talking to someone who remembers Walt Frazier winning the NIT at Southern Illinois.
That's way back when.
What century was that, Greg?
That's before.
The
That's
Salukis.
Salukis.
That's right. That is a good job.
I used to
Good
go to
job.
the NIT. The NIT used to be bigger than the NCAA. People probably
I
don't
do remember that. I do remember.
And I used to
what
go
it
to the
was.
NIT every year with my dad at Madison Square Garden. We'd see a triple header.
Yes, I remember when the Big East
Yeah.
was great, and now the Big East is not great anymore because it's not
No.
the Big East.
Boy,
not
I
the real Big
certainly
East.
American.
Just read a great book, by the way, on the Big East by Dana Pettit O'Neill. It's a
Oh,
really
great.
good book.
Dana's awesome. All right,
Really
I'll check
good
that
book.
out. Nice. Adam Caplan, it is your time to give us the game time watch player to watch
I
today.
am feeling that Fletcher Cox, as I said after week 1, I probably had him as my player of the game in week 2 or 3, but be embarrassed by that tape. He's going to come out here and play well. Yes, he'll rush the passer, but I believe he knows he's got to play with better technique. I expect him to play a good game today.
All right, Fletcher Cox with the bounce back. A couple sacks, you think? A forced fumble?
Yeah. They hit in week 1 at Atlanta last year. They hit him 9 times, Matt Ryan.
Right.
And Hargrave, by the way, he had a couple sacks in that game.
Right. All right. My game time watch player of the game, Greg. Like you, I put a couple of extra minutes of thought, or seconds, of thought into this. I generally think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think these are two good defenses, and I think that it's not going to be one of those games where maybe other than Jonathan Taylor, someone's going to have a real box score type game. So I went with Paris Campbell. I think he's going to have one of those 6 for 65 type games, 6 catches, 65 yards, maybe get a touchdown in there, maybe a few jet sweep runs, 2 for 15, 20, sort of like a Curtis Samuel-like game. And in that kind of game, I think it's going to stand out. So he is my player to watch. I'm not saying he's going to be the most important player on the game for either team, but he is my player to watch because I like a good storyline. The Eagles like Paris Campbell that year.
They went with the guy.
They went with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside for some other reasons instead.
I have no idea.
Paris Campbell was hurt for most of his career, so it didn't look like either of them were going to be good. But we know that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is not able yet to play in this league. We know Paris Campbell can play when he's healthy.
And he's on a contract here.
And he is on a contract.
It's amazing how that works out.
Amazing how that
sometimes.
happens. So he is my player to watch. Doesn't necessarily mean, though, I'm picking the Colts to win, foreshadowing. I'm just saying I expect him to be my player to watch
Do you like
today.
Campbell for fantasy today?
If you're in a PPR, yes. Standard scoring,
per
maybe not
reception,
so
okay.
much. But yeah, I would like Paris Campbell.
What are they talking about?
You know that? All right.
You know.
All right, let's take one last look at the line in total before we get to our predictions. The Eagles are favored. It was 6.5. Now, earlier in the week, I believe it was up to like 9.5, and then all the injuries and things went going on. So now it's 6.5. Eagles are favored with a over/under of 46.5, which is also, I think, up a point since the last day or two. Jason, who's going to win this game?
Eagles 27-20, and the reason I think it's going to be not a high-scoring game. I think the Eagles going to be right around their average for the season scoring.
Okay, 27-20. Do you see it's like really close and then a close-it-out touchdown?
Yeah.
All right.
Close game. Eagles win late.
Awesome. Eagles win. Craig,
I know I picked the Eagles,
you did?
but because it was a couple of days ago, I can't remember the score.
Yeah,
Both scores are divisible by 8. Does that help?
24-16?
Yes.
24-7. Hey, good job.
I didn't know you
Good
knew
job.
math.
That's the only math you'll ever get out of me, by the way.
Hey,
Really?
I was really good at math.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't know by looking at you, really.
Really good.
Probably the only one among us three, at least. Jason, he's probably good at math.
really good
Receivers
at
are
math.
always good at numbers.
I did really well on my SATs and math.
Nice.
Really well.
I did not. That's why I'm here.
So what happened?
So what happened?
Everybody's a comedian, Jeff. Everybody's a comedian.
Yeah,
Say
some
that
better
with
than
love
others,
as
Greg.
much as,
Yeah,
as far as you know we do.
Some better than others, some worse than others.
Right.
Adam, who'd you pick?
I picked the Eagles, but an extremely low-scoring game, 20-13. We know they're not going to ask Ryan to throw the ball a lot. In fact, if they do just control the run.
Right.
You don't have to just eliminate. But as Jason said, this is the one thing that worries me about this game. Right when you think you have Jonathan Taylor breaks off an 80-yard run.
Well, he's that kind of guy.
He's that guy. He's
Yeah.
done that his entire career.
Right.
And this defense worries me because they could relax. But yeah, they'll win. They're going to respond well to last week's game.
All right. All three of you so far picked not only the Eagles to win, but to cover. Greg and Adam are actually on the under, whereas Jay was a little bit over.
Pick them every week.
You do pick the Eagles every. Yeah, you have picked the Eagles every
I
week.
don't know why,
That's
but
why you're
it's better
8-1.
than the other team.
All right. I am going to predict also a low-scoring game. I said Paris Campbell is going to be my player to watch. However, I think the Eagles will win. They will win 24-20, which is not going to cover, and will go under the total, according to Geoff Mosher. So those are our picks. It is a clean sweep for the Eagles as they get back, at least in our opinion, on the winning side. Remember, you can bet the game right here at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook in Philadelphia or on your Bet Rivers app. We've got a watch party we're about to do. Come on down and see us. Big thanks to Rivers, Game Time Watches, Sky Motor Cars, the teams at Rebel Hill and Public Square, Mojo. Make sure you check out all of our coverage on InsideTheBirds.com. Make sure you check out Inside the Birds postgame with myself, Adam Caplan, and Trey Thomas. For everybody watching, for Jason, for Greg, for Adam, we wish you all a happy Thanksgiving this week, and we'll catch you next Sunday night.